The boy stood in the doorway of Blackwater Diner with a rusted key clutched in his trembling fist, rain pouring off his soaked jacket like blood from a fresh wound. He couldn't have been more than 13, bruised knuckles, hollow eyes, the kind of fear that comes from watching someone die slowly. Behind him, 18 Harley-Davidson engines idled in the storm like caged predators waiting to be unleashed. Inside, Ryder Kane looked up from his untouched coffee, and the cigarette fell from his scarred fingers when he saw the symbol stamped into that key. A skeletal raven nobody had spoken about in 9 years. The symbol of Ghost Mercer, the brother they exiled, the man they all believed had betrayed them. The boy's voice barely cut through the thunder. "My father said you'd remember. Before we ride into this storm together, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. This story gets darker before it finds the light, and I need to know you're ready to see it through to the end." The rain didn't stop for 3 days after the boys showed up. Ryder Kane had lived 42 years on this earth, and he'd learned that weather had a way of marking the moments when everything changes. The night his father died, snow had buried Highway 54 so deep the ambulance never made it. The morning he first wore his black vulture's patch, the sun rose blood red over the Missouri hills like the sky itself was sealing a covenant. And now this, a storm that turned the world into a drowning gray blur, while a kid who looked like he'd been running his entire life stood dripping on the diner's linoleum floor. Ryder's hands were steady when he picked up the fallen cigarette, but something cold moved through his chest, the kind of cold that had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with ghosts you thought you'd buried deep enough they'd never claw their way back up. "What's your name, kid?" Ryder's voice came out rougher than he intended. The diner had gone silent. Every biker in the place had turned to look, and the waitress, Carol, who'd been pouring coffee here since before Ryder got his first bike, had frozen with the pot still tilted mid-pour. The boy's jaw worked like he was chewing on broken glass. His eyes never left Ryder's face. Eli Mercer. The name hit the room like a thrown brick through stained glass. Watson, the club's sergeant-at-arms, pushed back from his booth hard enough that the table scraped across the floor. His coffee cup tipped over, dark liquid spreading across the surface like oil. "Bullshit. Easy." Ryder didn't look away from the kid. The boy hadn't flinched when Watson stood up. 6'4", 250 of scar tissue, and bad decisions, which meant either he was too stupid to be scared or he'd already seen worse. Ryder knew which one he was betting on. "How old are you?" "Joe. 13. "Where's your mother?" The boy's throat worked. "Dead. 2 weeks ago. Cancer." Carol made a soft sound behind the counter. Ryder felt that cold thing in his chest spread wider. Torque, sitting 2 booths down, lit a cigarette with hands that shook just enough to notice if you knew what to look for. He'd lost his own mother to the same disease 4 years back. "And your father?" Ryder kept his voice level, but everyone in the room knew the answer. Everyone in the room had known it for 9 years, carried it like a stone in their pockets, tried to forget it every time they rode out together into the Missouri night. "I never met him." Eli's voice cracked on the last word. He swallowed hard, fighting it back. "Mom said his name was Ghost. Said if I ever needed help, I should find the Black Vulture's MC and show them this." He held up the key again. The skeletal raven caught the diner's fluorescent light, throwing shadows across his palm. Ryder stood slowly. His knee protested, old injury from a crash in 2009 that never healed right, but he didn't let it show. "You got any other family?" "No." "Anyone know you came here?" "No." "Anyone following you?" The boy hesitated. That hesitation told Ryder everything he needed to know. "Maybe?" Eli's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I don't know. There was a car. Black sedan. Followed me for 3 days before I lost it in Kansas City." Watson swore under his breath. Ryder's jaw tightened. Behind them, the rest of the club was already moving, checking windows, watching the parking lot, hands drifting toward the guns they all carried but never talked about in polite company. "Carol." Ryder didn't turn around. "Lock the door." The metallic click of the deadbolt sounded like the hammer of a revolver cocking. Ryder crossed the distance to the boy in 4 strides. Up close, he could see the exhaustion carved into Eli's face, the way his hand shook even though he was trying to hide it. Could see the bruises on his knuckles were fresh, maybe 2, 3 days old. Defensive wounds, the kind you got when someone grabbed you and you fought back hard enough that they thought twice about trying again. Give me the key. What? Eli's fingers tightened around it. It's mine. I know. Ryder's voice gentled just slightly. But I need to look at it. I'll give it back. The boy studied his face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there must have been enough, because he slowly uncurled his fist and dropped the key into Ryder's palm. The metal was cold, worn smooth in places where hands had gripped it too many times over too many years. The skeletal raven was crude, hand-stamped, the kind of work Ghost used to do in the clubhouse garage when he couldn't sleep. Back before everything went to hell. Back before the vote that tore the club apart and sent Ghost running into the night like a criminal, Ryder's thumb traced the edges of the symbol. Memories came back in fragments. Ghost laughing over a beer, Ghost working on his bike with that focused intensity that meant he was trying not to think about something else. Ghost's face when Ryder told him he had 24 hours to leave Missouri and never come back. The weight of 9 years pressed down on Ryder's shoulders. Where'd you get this? Mom's jewelry box. She kept it hidden under a bunch of other stuff. I found it after she... Eli's voice trailed off. He looked away, blinking hard. After. Your mom ever talk about him? Sometimes, when she thought I was asleep. Eli's jaw tightened. She'd sit at the kitchen table and cry, real quiet, like she was trying not to bother anybody even though it was just the two of us. Torka made a rough sound in his throat and turned away, pressing his forehead against the cold window glass. Rain streaked down the other side, distorting his reflection. Ryder closed his fist around the key. This key open anything else? A box? A locker? A storage unit? I don't know. Eli met his eyes again. But Mom said if I found you, you'd know what to do with it. She said you'd understand. Understand what? That my father wasn't what you all thought he was. The diner went dead silent again. This time, the silence had teeth. Watson took a step forward. Kid, you don't know what you're talking about. Sit down, Watson. Ryder didn't raise his voice, but command ran through it like steel cable. Watson sat, but his hand stayed flat on the table, ready to move. Ryder looked at Eli again. Really looked. The boy had Ghost's nose, Ghost's stubborn jawline, the same way of standing like he was bracing for impact even when nothing was coming at him yet. But his eyes were different, darker, older. Eyes that had already seen the world take away the one person who mattered and leave him standing in the ruins trying to figure out what came next. What did your mother tell you about him? That he loved her, that he loved me even though he never got to meet me, that he left to protect us from something bad. Eli's voice steadied. She said he wrote letters every month for 3 years. Then they stopped coming. Letters? Ryder felt something cold slide down his spine. Where are these letters? Burned. She burned them all before she died, said they were too dangerous to keep. Eli's hands curled into fists at his sides. But she told me what they said. She told me everything. The rain hammered harder against the windows. One of the neon signs outside flickered and died, throwing shadows across half the diner. Carol had backed up against the counter, one hand pressed to her mouth. She'd been here the night Ghost left. She'd seen the vote. She'd watched the club tear itself apart. Ryder weighed the key in his palm, felt its history, its accusations, its potential to crack open everything they'd tried to bury. Watson, take Eli out to the clubhouse. Get him dry clothes, hot food. Keep him in the main room where everyone can see him. Ryder, do it. Watson stood slowly, eyes locked on Ryder's face. They'd been riding together for 17 years, long enough that Watson could read the warning in Ryder's expression without needing it spelled out. You sure about this? No. Ryder's voice was flat. But we're doing it anyway. Watson jerked his head at Eli. Come on, kid. Stay close and don't talk to anyone unless they talk to you first. Eli glanced at Ryder one more time, something like hope flickering in those two old eyes, then followed Watson toward the door. The other bikers fell in around them. Protective circle, watching the parking lot, hands never far from their weapons. The door opened. Cold wind and rain swept in. The motorcycles outside roared to life one by one, a thunderous chorus that vibrated through the diner's walls. Then they were gone, 18 bikes carrying the boy away into the storm, while red taillights vanished like dying stars. Ryder stood alone in the sudden quiet. Torque hadn't moved from the window. His reflection was a ghost in the rain-streaked glass. He looks just like him. I know. If Ghost really did have a kid, then we've got a problem. Ryder turned the key over in his fingers. Because if that boy's telling the truth, everything we thought we knew about Ghost is a lie. And if he's not telling the truth, then someone sent a 13-year-old kid into a biker clubhouse with a fake story and ghost symbol, which means we've still got a problem. Ryder pocketed the key. Either way, we're going to find out. Torque finally turned from the window. His face was haggard in the fluorescent light, carved with lines that hadn't been there 9 years ago. You think Ghost is still alive? No. The word came out harder than Ryder intended. If he was alive, he would have come back by now. For his kid, if nothing else. Unless he couldn't. The possibility hung between them like smoke. Ryder's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. Text from Watson. At Clubhouse, kids asking for you. Come on. Ryder headed for the door. We've got work to do. Ryder. Torque's voice stopped him halfway. What if we were wrong about him? Ryder's hand rested on the door handle. Outside, his Harley waited in the rain, chrome dulled by water and darkness. He'd ridden that bike the night they voted Ghost out. Ridden it through a summer thunderstorm while his best friend disappeared into the Missouri night, carrying accusations Ryder had believed without question. Then we've been living with the wrong Ghost for 9 years, Ryder said quietly. And that's something we're going to have to answer for. He pushed through the door into the rain. Ba-jumped. The Black Vulture's clubhouse sat 15 miles outside of town, at the end of a gravel road that wound through pine trees and old farmland. Nobody wanted any more. The building had been a tobacco barn once, back in the 50s, before the club bought it for cash and turned it into something between a fortress and a home. Heavy wooden beams, stone foundation, gun slits disguised as windows, 18 motorcycles lined up out front like a steel barricade. Ryder killed his engine and sat for a moment in the rain, feeling the cold water run down his leather jacket. His hands ached. They always ached before a storm, old breaks that never healed quite right. He'd gotten those breaks in a fight 7 years ago, defending a woman whose boyfriend had decided his fists made better arguments than his words. Ryder had put the man in the hospital and wore the reminder in his bones every day since. Sometimes protection had a price that never stopped collecting. He swung off the bike and walked toward the clubhouse. The door opened before he reached it. Dutch, the club's road captain, stood in the doorway backlit by yellow light. Smoke curled around him. Inside, Ryder could hear voices, tense, overlapping, the sound of men who'd had too much coffee and not enough answers. He in there? Ryder didn't break stride. Main room. Watson's got him near the fireplace. Dutch fell into step beside him. Kid hasn't said much, just sits there watching everything like he's memorizing exits. Smart. Ryder. Dutch's voice dropped lower. Half the club wants him gone before sunrise. They're saying Ghost Trouble doesn't belong here anymore. Other half? Divided. Some think we owe it to Ghost to hear the boy out. Others think this is a setup. Dutch paused. Grizz wants a vote. Ryder's jaw tightened. Grizz had been the loudest voice 9 years ago calling for Ghost's exile. Old, mean, carrying grudges like other men carried wallets. Tell Grizz there's not going to be a vote tonight. He's not going to like that. He doesn't have to like it. He just has to live with it. They pushed through the door. The clubhouse smelled like it always did. Oil, leather, wood smoke, bourbon, and the particular scent of men who'd spent their lives on motorcycles instead of in offices. The main room stretched 40 feet across, dominated by a stone fireplace big enough to stand in. Wooden tables scarred with cigarette burns and knife marks. Pool table in the corner. Bar along the far wall where Jake was already pouring drinks nobody had asked for yet. Eli sat in a chair near the fire, wrapped in a blanket too big for him. Steam rising from a mug of coffee. He wasn't drinking. Watson stood 3 feet away, arms crossed, watching the room. The rest of the club had spread out, some at the tables, some at the bar, some standing near the walls like they were preparing for a fight they didn't want but knew was coming. Every head turned when Ryder walked in. He crossed to the fireplace without speaking. The boy looked up, and Ryder saw the exhaustion there clearly now, the kind of tired that went deeper than missing sleep, the kind that came from carrying weight nobody should have to carry at 13. "You warm enough?" Eli nodded. His hands were wrapped around the coffee mug like he was trying to absorb its heat through the ceramic. Ryder pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. His knee protested. He ignored it. "I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to answer them truthfully. If I think you're lying, this conversation ends and you're out of here before morning. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Don't call me sir. Call me Ryder." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "How'd you find us?" Mom kept newspaper clippings, old ones, articles about the club from years ago. There was one with a picture of the clubhouse in the background." Eli's voice was steady despite the exhaustion. "I looked up the town, got a bus ticket, walked the rest." "How long you been walking?" 3 days. "In this weather?" "I didn't have a choice." Ryder studied the boy's face. No deception there, just the flat truth of someone who'd run out of options and kept moving anyway. "Tell me about this car that was following you." Eli's grip tightened on the mug. "Black sedan, tinted windows, Missouri plates, but I couldn't see the numbers. First saw it outside Kansas City. Every time I changed buses, it showed up again an hour later." "You lose it?" "I think so." "Hopped off at a truck stop, hitched a ride with an old guy in a pickup. He dropped me at a rest area about 20 miles from here, walked the rest." Eli paused. "Haven't seen it since yesterday afternoon." "But you're not sure?" "No." Grizz's voice cut across the room like a rusty blade. "This is bullshit, Ryder. Kid shows up with some old key and a sob story, and you're just going to believe him?" Ryder didn't turn around. "Not done talking yet, Grizz." "Well, I'm done listening." Chair legs scraped. Grizz stood up, 63 years old and mean as a junkyard dog. "Ghost betrayed this club, stole from us, ran like a coward. Now his bastard kid shows up asking for protection? Hell no. Sit down. Make me." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ryder stood slowly, turning to face Grizz. The old biker had 4 inches and 30 pounds on him, none of it soft. Scars tracked across his knuckles from decades of bar fights, and worse. But Ryder had led this club for 6 years, and he'd earned that position by being the man who stood when everyone else wanted to run. "You want to challenge me, Grizz? We can do that, but not tonight, not in front of the kid." Ryder's voice was quiet, deadly calm. "Right now we've got a 13-year-old orphan who came here because his dying mother told him we'd help. Whatever Ghost did or didn't do, that's not this boy's weight to carry. His father's sins are his father's sins, not his." Ryder took a step forward. "You remember what this club stands for? We protect people who can't protect themselves. We stand between the wolves and the innocents. That's the code we swore to follow." Code didn't mean shit to Ghost. Maybe not, but it means something to me. And while I'm president, it's going to mean something to this club. Ryder held Grizz's stare. "Now sit down or get out." For a long moment, nobody moved. The fire crackled. Outside, rain hammered against the roof. Somewhere in the building, a door slammed. Grizz's jaw worked. Then he spat on the floor and stalked toward the exit, shoving past Dutch hard enough to make the other man stumble. The door crashed open. His motorcycle roared to life. The sound faded into the storm. The tension in the room eased slightly, but didn't disappear. Ryder turned back to Eli. The boy was staring at him with something close to awe. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did." Ryder sat down again. His hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline. He folded them together to hide it. "Now tell me about the key. Your mother said we'd know what to do with it." "What did she mean?" Eli set down the coffee mug. "She said Dad left things behind when he ran. Important things. Evidence, she called it. Things that would prove he didn't betray you." He pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders. "She said the key would open it." "Open what?" "She didn't know. Or she wouldn't tell me. Just said if I brought it to you, you'd figure it out." Watson moved closer. "Ryder, you thinking what I'm thinking?" "The storage shed." "What storage shed?" Eli looked between them. Ryder exchanged a glance with Watson. The sergeant-at-arms nodded slowly, hand moving to the gun tucked into his waistband, just in case. Your father used to work on bikes out back, had a storage shed where he kept his tools, parts, projects he was restoring. Ryder pulled the key from his pocket. If he hid something, that's where it'd be. Place has been locked up since he left. Nobody's been inside in 9 years. Why not? The question hung in the air. Because nobody wanted to, Torque said quietly from the bar. Felt wrong, like disturbing a grave. Eli's face went pale. Is he... No. Ryder's voice was firm. If your father was buried on club property, we'd know. This is different. Then let's go look. Eli stood up, blanket falling away. Beneath it he wore clothes that were too big, borrowed from Watson's locker probably. Jeans rolled at the cuffs, flannel shirt hanging off his thin frame. If there's evidence that proves he didn't betray you, wouldn't you want to see it? Kid's got a point, Jake called from the bar. It's past midnight. Watson checked his watch. Place will be locked up, dark, probably full of spiders and rust. So? Eli's chin lifted. I didn't come all this way to wait for morning. Ryder looked at the boy and saw Ghost staring back at him. That same stubborn determination. That same unwillingness to quit even when quitting was the smart option. 9 years ago, Ghost had stood in this same room and refused to back down from the accusations being thrown at him. Refused to run even though everyone told him he should. In the end, they'd made him leave anyway. Maybe they'd been wrong. The possibility was like swallowing broken glass. All right. Ryder stood, ignoring his knee. Watson, grab some flashlights. Torque, you're with us. Rest of you stay here. Keep watch. Anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call immediately. Dutch stepped forward. Want me to post someone at the road? Do it. And Dutch? Ryder met his eyes. Nobody comes down that driveway tonight unless we're expecting them. Copy that. Ryder headed toward the back door, Eli falling into step beside him. The boy moved quietly, like someone used to not being noticed. Watson and Torque grabbed flashlights from the supply closet and followed. Rain hit them the moment they stepped outside. Cold, driving, the kind that soaked through leather in seconds. The storage shed sat 100 yards behind the main clubhouse, half hidden by trees that had grown wild over the years. The structure was small, maybe 12 by 15 feet, built from corrugated metal that had rusted orange in the weather. A heavy padlock hung from the door, old and crusted with age. Ryder played his flashlight over the lock. Key should fit here. Eli handed it to him without hesitation. The key slid into the lock like it had been waiting. For a moment, it stuck. Rust fighting against motion, then gave with a grinding sound that seemed too loud in the storm. The lock fell open. Ryder pulled the door wide. Inside, darkness waited. His flashlight beam cut through the black, revealing shapes draped in dusty tarps. Workbench along one wall. Tool chests. Bike parts hanging from hooks. The smell of old oil and decay. And in the center, taking up most of the space, a large shape covered by a tarp that might have been white once, but had yellowed to the color of bone. What is that? Eli whispered. Ryder moved forward slowly. His boots crunched on debris. Broken glass, metal shavings, things that had fallen and never been picked up. The others followed, flashlight beams dancing across walls covered in old posters and schematics. He reached the large shape and gripped the tarp, pulled. The canvas fell away like a shroud. Beneath it sat a 1972 Harley-Davidson Ironhead Sportster, Ghost's bike, the one he'd been restoring before everything went to hell. Primer gray, partially disassembled, engine pulled and sitting on the workbench. Ryder remembered Ghost working on this machine, spending hours getting the timing perfect, talking about how he was going to ride it all the way to California once it was done. He never finished it. Is that his? Eli's voice was barely audible. Yeah, Ryder's throat was tight. That's his. Watson moved along the wall, flashlight revealing more details. More projects half finished. More dreams interrupted. Ryder, over here. Ryder turned. Watson was standing near the back corner, pointing his light at the floor. Ryder crossed to him, Eli close behind. The flashlight beam revealed a section of concrete that looked different from the rest. Newer, cleaner. That's fresh, Torque muttered. Maybe 5, 6 years old, How can you tell? Eli asked. Color. Old concrete darkens. This is still light gray. Torque knelt down, running his hand across the surface. And look at the edges. Cut clean. This was poured to cover something. Ryder's pulse quickened. We need a sledgehammer. On it. Watson disappeared into the darkness, returning a moment later with a heavy tool from the workbench. He handed it to Ryder. You sure? No, but we're doing it anyway. Ryder hefted the sledgehammer, brought it down hard on the concrete. The impact jarred his arms, sent cracks spiderwebbing across the surface. He hit it again. Again. Pieces began to break away, revealing darkness beneath. The others joined in, pulling chunks free, clearing the hole that opened in the floor. Inside the cavity sat a steel box, military-grade, waterproof seal, lock on the front that looked newer than everything else in the shed. Ryder's hands shook as he pulled it free. The box was heavy, maybe 30 pounds. He set it on the workbench, flashlight beams converging on it from all sides. Will the key open this? Eli moved closer. Ryder tried it. The key didn't fit. No, this needs a combination or Wait. Eli reached past him, fingers finding a seam along the bottom edge of the box. Mom taught me this. She said sometimes locks are just for show. He pressed hard, and something clicked. The box's lid popped open. For a moment, nobody breathed. Inside, packed carefully, were layers of documents, photographs, a leather journal with Ghost's name embossed on the cover, dog tags, and beneath everything, a thick manila envelope sealed with red wax. Ryder's hands were steady as he lifted out the journal. The leather was worn soft, the pages inside filled with Ghost's familiar handwriting, tight, efficient, covering every inch of paper like he'd been racing against time. What does it say? Eli's voice shook. Ryder opened to the first page. If you're reading this, I'm either dead or I managed to get far enough away that they'll never find me. Either way, these are the things I couldn't say when I was still there. These are the truths they didn't want to hear. My name is Michael Ghost Mercer, and I did not betray the Black Vulture's MC, but someone did. And if you keep reading, you're going to find out who. The rain hammered against the shed roof like accusations. Lightning flashed outside, throwing stark shadows across the workbench. And in that moment of electric white light, Ryder saw everything they'd believed for 9 years begin to crack apart, because Ghost hadn't run. He'd been driven away. And the evidence of who did it was right here in his hands. The journal pages felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds in Ryder's hands. He stood under the flickering light of the storage shed, rain drumming against the metal roof in a rhythm that matched his pulse. Watson and Torque crowded close, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness to illuminate Ghost's handwriting. Precise, methodical, each word chosen like ammunition being loaded into a chamber. Eli pressed against the workbench, eyes wide, barely breathing. Ryder turned the page. Read silently. His jaw tightened with each line, the muscles in his neck going rigid. The cigarette he'd lit a minute ago burned forgotten between his fingers, ash growing long before falling to the concrete floor. What does it say? Watson's voice was rough with something that might have been fear. Ryder didn't answer immediately. He kept reading, his eyes moving faster now, scanning dates and names and details that turned his stomach. When he finally looked up, his face had gone pale beneath the stubble and road dust. We need to get back to the clubhouse. Now. He closed the journal carefully, like it might explode if handled wrong. And we need to call a full church meeting. Everyone. No exceptions. Ryder, now Watson. The sergeant-at-arms knew better than to argue when Ryder used that tone. They gathered everything from the steel box, documents, photographs, the sealed envelope, and loaded it into a canvas bag Watson pulled from beneath the workbench. Ghost Harley sat silent in the shadows, still waiting for the ride it would never take. Or maybe it would. Ryder looked at the bike, then at Eli. The boy was staring at the machine like it was a gravestone. That's going to ride again, Ryder said quietly. Eli's head snapped up. What? Your father's bike. We're going to finish what he started. Bon. Ryder moved toward the door, canvas bag slung over his shoulder. But first, we're going to read every word he wrote. And then we're going to decide what kind of men we want to be. Oche. They walked back through the rain, 4 figures moving through the darkness like soldiers returning from a battlefield where the dead wouldn't stay buried. The clubhouse lights burned yellow in the distance. Motorcycles lined up outside looked like sentinels standing guard over secrets that were about to detonate. Dutch met them at his door, rifle slung across his back. His face was grim. Got a call from one of the prospects watching the highway. Black sedan passed by twice in the last hour. Slowed down near our turnoff both times. Ryder's jaw clenched. Get everyone inside, lock it down. Nobody leaves until I say so. What's going on? You'll find out with everyone else. The clubhouse had filled up since they left. Word must have spread because brothers who'd been home with their families, brothers who'd been working night shifts, even Grizz, who'd peeled out in anger an hour ago, had returned and now sat at one of the back tables, arms crossed, eyes hard. Ryder counted heads. 19 bikers. Plus Eli. 20 souls about to have their reality rearranged. He dropped the canvas bag on the main table with a heavy thud that silenced the room. Every conversation died. Every head turned. The fire crackled in the hearth, throwing dancing shadows across walls covered in photographs of fallen brothers and rides that felt like they'd happened in another lifetime. Church, now! Ryder's voice carried the weight of command. Eli, you sit by the fire. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. The boy nodded and sank into the chair he'd occupied before, wrapping himself in the too-big blanket again. His eyes tracked every movement in the room, cataloging faces, exits, potential threats. Smart kid. Survival instincts sharp enough to cut. The bikers filed into the church room, a back section of the clubhouse separated by a heavy wooden door. Inside sat a long table built from barnwood, scarred by years of fists being pounded during heated debates. 19 chairs, no windows. One way in, one way out. The walls were bare except for the black vulture's patch mounted above the head of the table. Skeletal raven with wings spread, carrying a banner that read, "Protection through steel." They'd voted Ghost out in this room. Now they were going to find out if they'd been wrong. Ryder took his seat at the head of the table. Watson sat to his right, Torque to his left. The rest filled in around them. Grizz, Dutch, Jake, Reaper, Bones, Crow, the whole roster of men who wore the patch and swore the oath. The door closed with a sound like a coffin lid. Nobody spoke. Ryder placed the journal on the table, set the photographs beside it. The envelope remained in the canvas bag for now. He could feel the weight of 19 sets of eyes on him, waiting, judging, preparing to either stand with him or tear him apart, depending on what came next. 9 years ago, we voted to exile one of our brothers. Ryder's voice was steady, but his hands beneath the table were clenched into fists. We believed Michael Mercer, Ghost, had stolen from the club. Specifically, we believed he'd taken $40,000 earmarked for Jimmy Reeves's medical bills and disappeared with it. We didn't believe it, Ryder. We knew it. Grizz leaned forward, elbows on the table. Money was there one day, gone the next. Ghost was the only one with access to the safe. He ran the same night. That's not a coincidence. No, it's not. Ryder opened the journal. It's a setup. The room erupted, voices overlapping, chairs scraping back, fists hitting wood. Watson stood up, hands raised, calling for order. It took a full minute before the chaos subsided enough for Ryder to continue. I'm going to read something to you. He found the page he'd marked in the shed. This is dated 3 days before Ghost left. Written in his handwriting. I've known Ghost since we were prospects together. I know his hand as well as I know my own. He began to read aloud, Ghost's words filling the room like smoke from a signal fire that had been burning unseen for 9 years. The money is gone. I know how it looks. I know what they'll think. But I didn't take it. Someone else did, and they made damn sure it would look like me. I spent the last 2 days trying to figure out who had access to the safe combination besides me and Ryder. Turns out there were 3 people. Me, Ryder, and one other brother who was in the office the night before the money disappeared. I watched the security footage, saw him go into the back room where the safe is, saw him come out 15 minutes later. I confronted him yesterday. He denied everything, but I could see it in his eyes. The guilt, the calculation. He knew I knew. And now I'm starting to think this was bigger than just stealing from the club. I think he's involved with something else, something that's going to get people killed. Bitches. Ryder looked up from the page. Ghost doesn't name the brother in this entry, but he does in the next one. He turned the page. The silence in the room had shifted from hostile to something colder, dread mixed with anticipation. The brother Ghost saw on that security footage, the one he confronted, the one he believed framed him. Ryder's eyes moved across the faces at the table. Was Marcus Reaper Doyle? Every head swiveled toward Reaper. The biker sat 3 seats down from Ryder, face unreadable, hands flat on the table. He was 41, lean and dangerous, with eyes like chips of black ice. He'd been with the club for 12 years. Good rider, solid in a fight, never caused trouble. Until now. That's bullshit. Reaper's voice was calm, too calm. Ghost was looking for someone to blame when he got caught. He picked me because he knew I'd worked late that night. Did you go into the back room? Ryder asked. Yeah, I went in to grab some paperwork Ryder had asked for earlier that day. Invoices for parts we'd ordered. Took me maybe 5 minutes to find them in the filing cabinet. 15 minutes? Ryder corrected. According to Ghost, you were in there 15 minutes. What were you doing for the other 10? Reaper's jaw tightened. I don't remember. It was 9 years ago. Maybe I took a piss. Maybe I had a cigarette. Maybe I stood there trying to remember where the hell Ryder said he'd filed the damn invoices. He leaned back in his chair. You're really going to take the word of a dead man who ran like a coward over mine? Ghost isn't dead. The words came from the doorway. Everyone turned. Eli stood there, blanket still wrapped around his shoulders, face set with determination. He must have followed them. Must have been listening outside the door. Kid, you need to go back, Watson started. My father isn't dead. Eli's voice was stronger now, cutting through the room. He was alive 3 years ago. That's when the letters stopped. That's when my mother started crying at night. That's when she started telling me if anything ever happened to her, I needed to find you. How do you know he was alive 3 years ago? Dutch asked. Because the last letter had a date on it, and a location. Eli stepped into the room. Nobody stopped him. He was in Colorado, some town called Milford. He said in the letter that he'd found evidence, real evidence, proof of what really happened. He said he was coming back. But he never came back, Torque said quietly. But he never came. No. Eli's hands tightened on the blanket. He didn't. And a week after that letter arrived, 3 men showed up at our apartment in Chicago, asking questions about my father. My mother told them she didn't know anything, that he'd left us years ago. They didn't believe her. They tore the place apart looking for something. I hid in a closet, heard everything. The room had gone deathly still. What were they looking for? Ryder's voice was soft but deadly. A ledger. They kept saying Ghost had a ledger that could burn their whole operation. Eli's eyes were dry, but his voice shook. They said if my mother didn't tell them where it was, they'd come back. And next time they wouldn't be asking nice. Reaper stood up slowly. His chair scraped against the wooden floor with a sound like nails on a coffin lid. This is insane. You're all going to believe some kid with a story that sounds like it came out of a bad movie? Ghost was a thief and a coward. He's probably dead in a ditch somewhere, and this is all... Sit down. Reaper. Ryder's voice was ice. No, I'm done with this circus. Ghost made his choices. We made ours. It's been 9 years. Let the dead stay dead. Reaper moved toward the door. I'm out. Watson blocked his path. 250 pounds of muscle and bad intentions. President said, sit down. For a moment, it looked like Reaper might try to force his way through. His hand drifted toward his waistband where Ryder knew he carried a .45. The tension in the room ratcheted up to the point where it felt like the air itself might shatter. Then Grizz spoke up, voice like gravel in a blender. Let him talk, Reaper. If Ghost was innocent, we all got blood on our hands. If he wasn't, then reading the rest of that journal won't hurt nothing. Reaper's eyes darted to Grizz. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then Reaper slowly moved back to his chair and sat down. His hands remained visible on the table, but his whole body was coiled tension waiting for an excuse to explode. Ryder forced himself to breathe normally. His heart was hammering against his ribs. There's more in the journal, pages and pages. Ghost documented everything, names, dates, deals he wasn't supposed to know about. Shipments coming through territories we'd agreed to stay out of. Money changing hands between Reaper and a crew out of Kansas City, the Grinders. Multiple bikers swore. The grinders were bad news. Small-time meth operation that had aspirations of becoming big-time, violent, unpredictable, the kind of crew that left bodies in their wake. The grinders wanted to use our territory as a pipeline, Ryder continued. Reaper agreed to it in exchange for a cut, 20% of everything that moved through. But he needed the deal to stay secret, which meant he needed someone to take the fall if things went sideways. So he framed Ghost, Watson said slowly, pieces falling into place. Yeah, stole the money from the safe. Made it look like Ghost did it. Leaked information to the club that would guarantee we'd vote Ghost out before he could defend himself properly. Ryder's hands were shaking now. He pressed them flat against the journal to stop it. Ghost figured it out too late. He went to confront Reaper, thinking he could handle it internally. But Reaper had already set things in motion. Ghost had two choices: stay and fight a battle he couldn't win with evidence he couldn't prove, or run and hope he could find a way to clear his name from a distance. Why not come to you? Jake asked. Why not come to the president and tell him everything? The question hit Ryder like a physical blow, because he knew the answer. Had known it the moment he read those first pages in the shed, because I wouldn't have believed him. The words tasted like ashes in Ryder's mouth. I was the one who brought the accusations to church. I was the one who said I'd checked the safe, found the money missing, and Ghost was the only person besides me with the combination. I was so damn certain. His voice cracked. I was his best friend, and I didn't believe him. The silence that followed was crushing. Torque put a hand on Ryder's shoulder, squeezed once. The gesture was small, but it kept Ryder from shattering completely. Ghost knew if he stayed, he'd either be exiled or killed, Ryder continued, forcing the words out. He knew the grinders would come for him eventually because Reaper would sell him out to protect the deal, so he ran. Not because he was guilty, because he was trying to stay alive long enough to prove his innocence. This is all very touching, Reaper said, voice dripping sarcasm. But it's also all bullshit. You've got a journal that could say anything. You've got a kid who showed up out of nowhere with a convenient story. What you don't have is proof. Actually, Eli said quietly, we do. Everyone turned to look at him. The boy reached into the pocket of his borrowed jeans and pulled out a small key, different from the one that had opened the storage shed. This one was newer, brass, with a number stamped into it. My mother gave me this before she died. Said it opens a safety deposit box in Colorado, Milford, Colorado, same town where my father's last letter came from. What's in the box? Dutch leaned forward. I don't know. She said only my father would know. But she said if I ever needed leverage, if I ever needed to make people listen, this key would open the door to the truth. Eli held it up, the brass catching the lamplight. She said there's a ledger in that box. Names, dates, transactions, everything the grinders did through Black Vulture's territory for 5 years, and everyone who was involved. Reaper went very still. She also said, Eli continued, voice steady despite the weight of every eye in the room on him, that my father wasn't the only one who knew about the ledger. The grinders knew, and they've been looking for it ever since he disappeared. That's why those men came to our apartment. That's why my mother burned his letters. And that's why... His voice wavered just slightly. That's why she's dead. The words dropped into the room like stones into deep water. What are you saying? Ryder asked quietly. I'm saying my mother's cancer wasn't the only thing killing her. Eli's eyes were dry but haunted. A month before she died, she got sicker faster than the doctors expected. Started having seizures, hallucinations. The doctors couldn't figure out why. She told me the night before she died that she thought someone had poisoned her. She said one of those men who came looking for the ledger had touched her coffee cup at work. 3 weeks later, she was dying. Jesus Christ, Torque breathed. Reaper stood up again, slower this time. His hand was definitely on his gun now. I don't have to listen to this. You've got a paranoid kid telling ghost stories and a dead man's fairy tale. I'm leaving, and if anyone tries to stop me, this gets ugly. Eat. It's already ugly, brother. Ryder stood too, facing him across the table. You stole from us. You framed Ghost. You made a deal with a crew that's killed more people than we can count, and you let us believe for 9 years that one of our best brothers betrayed us. You believed what you wanted to believe. Reaper's smile was cold. I just gave you the story. You did the rest yourselves. Why? The question came from Grizz, and his voice was raw. Ghost was your brother. We were your family. Why would you do this? Family? Reaper laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. Family doesn't pay the bills, old man. Family doesn't get you out of debt. Family doesn't keep the bank from taking your house when you're 3 months behind on the mortgage. He looked around the room at faces that had gone from angry to shocked. I needed money. The grinders offered it. Simple as that. $40,000. Watson's voice was flat. You sold out Ghost for $40,000. Actually, I sold him out for $200,000. 40 grand was just what I took from the safe to make it look good. The rest came from the grinders over the next 2 years. Would have been more if Ghost hadn't gotten smart and started keeping records. Reaper's hand tightened on his gun. And before you all start getting righteous, ask yourselves what you would have done. Half of you got kids you can't afford to feed, bikes you can't afford to fix, medical bills piling up. The club talks about brotherhood, but brotherhood doesn't pay for shit. So you destroyed a good man to line your pockets. Ryder's voice was dangerously quiet. And when he figured out what you'd done, you didn't just let him leave. You made sure the grinders knew where to find his family. I didn't. Reaper stopped, recalculated. They would have found them eventually anyway. But you pointed them in the right direction. Ryder took a step closer to the table. You gave them Chicago. You gave them enough information to track down a woman and a kid who'd done nothing wrong except be related to a man whose only crime was being too honest to ignore your betrayal. Reaper pulled the gun, held it steady, pointed at Ryder's chest. Back off. Nobody moved. 19 bikers frozen in a moment that could go sideways in a heartbeat. The only sound was breathing and the crackle of the fire in the main room beyond the door. You gonna shoot me, Reaper? Ryder's voice was calm. In front of the whole club? You think you're walking out of here after that? I think I'm walking out of here either way. Reaper's eyes flickered to the door behind Watson. Because none of you have the balls to stop me. You let Ghost run 9 years ago on nothing but suspicion. You'll let me walk now on the same grounds. We were wrong 9 years ago. Ryder spread his hands slowly, showing he was unarmed. We're not wrong now, and we're not letting you walk. Then I guess we're at an impasse. Not quite. Eli's voice cut through the tension. The boy had moved while everyone's attention was on Reaper, circling around to the side of the room. He held something in his hands. The sealed envelope from the steel box. My father left one more thing. He said to only open it if everything else failed. Kid, this isn't the time, Dutch started. But Eli had already torn the envelope open. Paper spilled out across the nearest surface. Photographs. And a single USB drive on a lanyard. He made copies, Eli said, voice shaking but determined. Copies of everything in the ledger. Pictures of his meetings with federal agents who were investigating the grinders. Recorded conversations with Reaper talking about the deal. He held up the USB drive. Everything you need to bury him. And everyone else who was involved. Reaper's gun hand wavered. You're bluffing. Am I? Eli set the drive on the table. Want to find out? Because my father was a lot of things, but he wasn't stupid. He knew he might not make it back. So he made sure the truth would survive even if he didn't. For a long moment, Reaper stared at the drive like it was a live grenade. Then his eyes moved to the door, calculating distances, odds, escape routes. Don't! Watson's voice was steel. You pull that trigger, you're dead before you hit the ground. You run, you won't make it past the parking lot. Only way this ends without blood is if you put the gun down and tell us everything. And then what? Reaper's laugh was desperate now, edged with panic. You turn me over to the feds? You handle me yourselves? Either way, I'm finished. Yeah, Ryder said quietly. You are. Question is how many people you're taking with you. The gun trembled. Reaper's face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. He was cornered, and cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. Then Grizz stood up slowly, joints popping. The old biker moved around the table until he was standing next to Reaper. For a moment, it looked like he might be backing his play. Then Grizz reached out and gently pushed Reaper's gun hand down until the barrel pointed at the floor. It's over, son. Grizz's voice was tired. Been over for a long time. You just didn't know it yet. Reaper's arm went slack, the gun clattered to the floor, and then he was falling backward into his chair, head in his hands, shoulders shaking with something that might have been sobs or laughter or both. The room exhaled collectively. Watson moved first, picking up the gun and clearing the chamber with practiced efficiency. Dutch pulled out his phone, already making calls. Jake grabbed the USB drive carefully, like it might bite. Ryder sank back into his chair, feeling like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. His hands were shaking badly now. Torque pushed a flask across the table toward him. He took it, drank, felt the burn of whiskey cut through the numbness. What now? Torque asked quietly. Now? Ryder looked at the journal, the photographs, the evidence of 9 years of lies and betrayal scattered across the table. Now we figure out how deep this goes. Who else was involved? What other deals Reaper made? And then... He stopped, couldn't quite finish the thought. Then we find Ghost, Eli said from the doorway. His voice was small but determined. Or we find out what happened to him. Because if he was in Colorado 3 years ago trying to come back, and he never made it... The boy's jaw tightened. Then someone stopped him. And I need to know who. Ryder looked at the kid, 13 years old, orphaned, carrying a dead man's quest like it was the only thing keeping him upright, and saw himself at that age, saw the same determination, the same refusal to quit even when quitting made sense, the same need for truth even when the truth was going to hurt. We'll find him, Ryder promised. Or we'll find out what happened. Either way, you're not alone in this anymore. None of us are, Watson added. His eyes moved around the room, taking in the faces of brothers who'd just learned they'd destroyed an innocent man. We did this together. We'll fix it together. If it can be fixed, Grizz muttered. It has to be. Ryder stood, bones aching, soul heavy. Because if we can't make this right, then what's the point of any of it? What's the point of the patch, the oath, the brotherhood? We failed Ghost once. We're not failing him again. He picked up the journal, held it like it was both weapon and shield. Church is over, but nobody leaves until we've gone through every page of this. Every name, every date, every deal. We're going to know exactly what we're dealing with before the sun comes up. The bikers nodded, faces grim. They filed back into the main room, bringing chairs, coffee, cigarettes, settling in for a long night of reckoning. Eli sat by the fire again, but this time he wasn't alone. Jake sat on one side, Dutch on the other. Silent guardians. Brothers who'd failed one kid's father but wouldn't fail the son. Ryder opened the journal to page 1 and began to read aloud. Ghost's voice filling the clubhouse like a man speaking from beyond the grave. Each word, an accusation. Each page, a revelation. Each entry forcing them to confront exactly what they'd done. The fire burned low. The rain slowed to a drizzle. And somewhere out in the darkness, a black sedan circled the back roads of Missouri, hunting for a boy carrying the last key to a truth that men had killed to keep buried. By the time Ryder reached the final entry in the journal, dated 3 years and 2 months ago, the sky outside was starting to lighten toward dawn. Gray light filtered through the windows. Empty coffee cups littered every surface. Cigarette smoke hung in layers below the ceiling. The final entry was short, just 3 lines. I found the proof. All of it. Everything I need to clear my name and destroy the Grinders operation. I'm coming home. Tell Ryder I forgive him. And tell my son I never stopped fighting to get back to him. Below it, written in different ink, in a shaking hand that barely looked like Ghost's writing, they found me. If you're reading this, I'm already dead. Protect my boy. That's all that matters now. Protect my boy. Ryder's vision blurred. He closed the journal carefully, set it down, and looked up at 19 faces that reflected his own grief and guilt back at him. He's dead, Torque said quietly. Ghost is dead. Maybe. Eli spoke from the fire, voice rough from not sleeping, from crying, from watching grown men break down over words in a dead man's journal. Or maybe that's what he wanted them to think. Maybe he's still out there, still hiding, still fighting. Kid, Jake started gently. Don't. Eli stood up, blanket falling away. Don't tell me he's dead. Don't tell me it's hopeless. Because if he's dead, then everyone who did this to him gets away with it. And I can't accept that. I won't. Ryder looked at the boy and felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been locked away for 9 years. The part of him that had believed in ghosts right up until the moment he'd chosen to believe the evidence instead. The part that had known his brother wouldn't betray them, and he'd ignored it. "You're right," Ryder said. His voice was hoarse from reading, from smoke, from holding back everything he was feeling. "We don't stop until we know for certain, one way or the other." "How?" Watson asked. "We've got a journal, we've got evidence of Reaper's betrayal, we've got a key to a safety deposit box in Colorado, but we don't have ghosts. We don't have bodies. We don't have answers." "Then we go to Colorado." Ryder stood, decision made. "We find that safety deposit box. We see what's inside, and we follow the trail wherever it leads." "That's 1,000 miles, Dutch pointed out. "And we've got a crew of grinders who'll be watching for anyone asking questions about their operation." "I don't care if it's 3,000 miles. Ryder's voice was steel. "We owe Ghost the truth. We owe him justice. And we owe him more than 9 years of believing he was something he wasn't." "I'm going." Eli moved forward, standing straighter than he had since he walked through the diner door. "With or without you. That box has my father's evidence in it. I'm the one who needs to open it." "You're 13, Grizz said, but his tone was gentler than before. "I'm Ghost's son." Eli lifted his chin. "And I've come too far to stop now." What? Ryder looked around the room, saw the exhaustion, the guilt, the determination forming like steel being tempered in fire. These were broken men who'd made a terrible mistake, but they were also men who kept their word once it was given. "We ride at noon," Ryder announced. "Anyone who's going needs to be ready. Anyone who's staying needs to understand that when we get back, things are going to be different. This club is going to be different. We're done making decisions based on fear and suspicion. We're done destroying our own because it's easier than finding the truth." "Amen to that," Watson muttered. The meeting broke up slowly. Bikers drifted toward beds, couches, anywhere they could catch a few hours of sleep before the ride ahead. Reaper was escorted to a back room and locked in. Not a cell, but close enough. He had faced judgment when they returned, assuming they returned. Ryder stayed at the table, journal open in front of him again. He couldn't stop reading Ghost's words. Couldn't stop seeing his friend's face in every line. Couldn't stop thinking about the 9 years Ghost had spent in exile, alone, hunted, knowing the men he'd called brothers had turned their backs on him. A hand touched his shoulder. He looked up. Eli stood there, eyes red-rimmed but steady. "Thank you," the boy said quietly. "For what? I'm the reason your father ran. I'm the reason he died." "No," Eli's voice was firm. "Reaper is the reason. The grinders are the reason. You were just wrong. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah." Eli sat down in the chair next to him. "Being wrong means you can make it right. That's what we're going to do. Make it right." Ryder looked at this kid, this impossibly brave, impossibly damaged kid, and felt something shift inside him, a purpose he hadn't known he'd lost until this moment when it came roaring back. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah, we are." Outside, the rain had stopped completely. Dawn painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and dying gray. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called out 3 times, the sound echoing across the Missouri hills like a ghost passing judgment on the living. And in the parking lot, 19 Harley-Davidsons waited in formation, chrome gleaming in the weak morning light, ready to carry broken men toward redemption or damnation, whichever waited for them at the end of a 1,000-mile ride into the mountains where secrets were buried deep, and the dead refused to stay silent. The convoy rolled out at noon exactly, 19 Harley-Davidsons in tight formation, cutting through the Missouri countryside like a steel arrow aimed at the heart of truth. Ryder led from the front. Eli pressed against his back on Ghost's restored Sportster, the boy's thin arms wrapped around his waist with a grip that said he understood this might be a one-way trip. Watson rode flanking position on the right, Torque on the left. The rest spread out behind them in a V formation that had been practiced so many times it happened without thought. The weather had turned. Cold front pushing down from Canada, dropping temperatures into the 30s, turning the sky the color of old bruises. Ryder's breath came out in white clouds inside his helmet. His hands ached on the handlebars. Behind him, Eli shivered, despite the extra layers they'd buried him in. Flannel, leather jacket 3 sizes too big, wool-lined gloves that kept sliding down over his knuckles. They rode hard for 6 hours straight, stopping only for gas and to let Eli use a restroom. Nobody talked much. The roar of the engine said everything that needed saying. Watson had plotted the route the night before. Straight shot west on I-70, cutting through Kansas like a blade through flesh, aiming for Colorado and whatever waited in Milford. Ryder's mind wouldn't stop churning. Ghost journal entries played on repeat behind his eyes. The dates. The names. The careful documentation of every meeting Reaper had with the grinders, every shipment that moved through Black Vulture's territory, every dollar that changed hands. 9 years of betrayal written in neat handwriting that got shakier toward the end, like Ghost's hands had started trembling as he realized how deep the corruption went. Because it wasn't just Reaper. That was the revelation that had come in the early morning hours, after most of the club had collapsed from exhaustion. Ryder had kept reading, and Ghost's later entries painted a picture that made his stomach turn. Reaper hadn't been working alone. He'd had help. Someone higher up the food chain. Someone who'd made sure the vote to exile Ghost happened quickly, before questions could be asked. Someone who'd benefited from Ghost's disappearance almost as much as Reaper had. Ghost never named that person in the journal, but he'd left clues. References to the old wolf and the one who taught me to ride, and the brother I trusted most after Ryder. Ryder knew who that was, had known the moment he read those lines, but his mind kept rejecting it, pushing it away, because accepting it meant accepting that the corruption in the Black Vultures went deeper than one desperate man stealing to pay his mortgage. It meant the club itself was rotten at the foundation. They crossed into Kansas as the sun started its descent, turning the plains into an ocean of gold and shadow. Eli had stopped shivering an hour back, gone still and quiet behind Ryder in a way that worried him. The kid hadn't eaten since breakfast, probably hadn't slept more than 2 hours in the last 48, running on adrenaline and grief and determination that would only carry him so far before his body gave out. Ryder signaled the convoy to pull off at a truck stop outside Salina. They filled up the bikes, grabbed food from a diner that smelled like grease and desperation. Eli picked at a burger, managing 3 bites before pushing it away. His face was pale in the fluorescent light, shadows carved deep beneath his eyes. "You need to eat," Ryder said quietly, sliding into the booth across from him. "Not hungry." "Don't care. Eat anyway." Ryder pushed the plate back toward him. "You pass out on the back of that bike, we're all going to have a bad time." Eli looked at him with those 2 old eyes. "How much further?" 6, maybe 7 hours if we push hard. We'll stop for the night around the Colorado border, hit Milford first thing tomorrow morning." "Why wait? Why not just ride straight through?" "Because we're going into unknown territory in the dark, and that's how people die." Ryder took a drink of coffee that tasted like motor oil. "We do this smart, or we don't do it at all." Watson slid into the booth next to Ryder, phone in his hand, face grim. "We got a problem." Ryder's jaw tightened. "Talk." "Dutch just called from the clubhouse. That black sedan showed up again. This time it didn't just drive by. 3 men got out, knocked on the door, asked for Eli by name. The diner noise faded to background static. Ryder's hand went to the gun tucked into his waistband without thinking. What did Dutch tell them? That he didn't know anyone by that name. They didn't believe him. Started asking questions about Ghost, about whether any strangers had shown up recently, about whether the club was planning any long rides. Watson's voice was low, urgent. Dutch got a look at one of them. Recognized him from his time running security in Kansas City. Guy named Vince Mallory, enforcer for the grinders, the kind they send when diplomacy is already off the table. Eli's face had gone white. The burger sat forgotten on his plate. They know I'm with you. Looks that way. Torquay had moved over from the next booth, looming above them. Question is how? We were careful. No social media, no phone calls outside the club, nothing that should have tipped them off. Go sumo. Unless someone tipped them off. Ryder's voice was flat. He looked at Watson. Everyone who rode out with us is solid? I thought so. Watson's eyes narrowed. But if the grinders know we're moving, if they know we're headed for Colorado, then we've got a leak. Ryder's mind raced. sorting through possibilities, discarding the unlikely, focusing on the probable. Someone in the club is feeding them information, someone who didn't ride out with us. Or someone who did. Torquay's voice was careful. We left in a hurry, didn't exactly have time to vet everyone properly. Ryder looked back at the convoy visible through the diner's grimy windows. 19 bikes lined up in the parking lot. 19 brothers he'd trusted with his life. But Ghost had trusted them too. And look how that turned out. We can't turn back, Eli said suddenly. His voice shook, but his jaw was set. If we turn back, they win. My father died trying to get this evidence back to you. I'm not letting that be for nothing. Kid's right. Watson leaned back, folding his arms. We're committed now. Only way out is through. Through what exactly? Ryder's voice was hard. We don't know what's waiting for us in Milford. We don't know if the evidence is even still there. And now we know the grinders are tracking us, which means they might be setting up an ambush. So we set up for them first. Torque's smile was cold. We've been in worse situations. Not with a 13-year-old kid riding with us. Ryder looked at Eli. This gets bad. You do exactly what I say, when I say it. No arguments, no hesitation. Understood? Eli nodded. They finished eating in tense silence, then headed back out into the cold. The sun had dropped below the horizon, leaving the world painted in shades of blue and gray. Wind cut across the plains like frozen knives. Ryder checked his gun before mounting the bike. Magazine full, round in the chamber, safety on. Watson did the same, so did Torque. The rest of the convoy noticed, started checking their own weapons without being told. The mood had shifted from determined to dangerous. They rode into the darkness, headlights cutting tunnels through the black, engines roaring in harmony. Eli pressed closer to Ryder's back, and he could feel the boy shaking again. Not from cold this time, from fear. Smart kid. Fear kept you alert, kept you alive. 2 hours past the Kansas-Colorado border, Ryder's phone buzzed in his pocket. He signaled the convoy to pull over on the shoulder, killed his engine. The others followed suit. Sudden silence except for the wind and the pinging of cooling metal. He checked the message. Dutch again. Call me. Now. Ryder stepped away from the bikes, Watson and Torque following. He dialed, put the phone on speaker. Dutch's voice came through rough, strained. Ryder, we got a situation. Talk fast. Those 3 men who showed up earlier? They came back an hour ago. This time they had a warrant. Federal warrant. Said they're investigating Ghost's disappearance as part of a larger case against the grinders. They searched the clubhouse, top to bottom. Took the journal, the photographs. Everything we recovered from the storage shed. Ryder's blood went cold. What about the USB drive? They didn't find it. Jake had it on him, wasn't at the clubhouse when they showed up. Dutch paused. But Ryder, that's not the worst part. The agent leading the search? I recognized him. His name is Thomas Briggs. Used to ride with the Red King's MC out of St. Louis before he joined the FBI. So the Red Kings are allies with the grinders. Have been for years. They run protection for their bigger shipments. Dutch's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Ryder, I think the feds are compromised. I think whoever took out Ghost has people inside federal law enforcement. The world tilted sideways. Watson swore under his breath. Torque went very still, the kind of still that preceded violence. And Ryder felt something inside him snap, not break, but transform into something harder, colder. Where's Reaper? He asked. Still locked up. Why? Because he's going to tell us everything he knows about how deep this goes. Ryder's voice was ice. Put him on the phone. Ryder, I don't think... Now, Dutch. Sounds of movement, a door opening. Then Reaper's voice wary and hostile. What? The feds just raided the clubhouse. Took all of Ghost's evidence. The agent leading the raid used to ride with a crew that's allied with the grinders. Ryder let that sink in. Which means either this is the most unbelievable coincidence in history, or you sold Ghost out to people with federal badges. Silence on the other end. Yes. Silence on the... Long enough that Ryder thought the connection had dropped. Then Reaper's voice came back, smaller, defeated. I didn't know they'd go that far. Explain. Now, see. The The Grinders had a contact in the FBI, some agent who'd been on their payroll for years, turning blind eyes, losing evidence, that kind of thing. When Ghost started digging into our operations, when he started keeping records, Reaper's breath rattled. They told me to make him disappear. I thought they just meant get him exiled from the club. I didn't know they were going to hunt him. I didn't know about the kid. But you found out. Ryder's hands were shaking with rage he could barely contain. You found out, and you didn't stop it. I couldn't stop it. Once Ghost was gone, once he started gathering evidence against them, they owned me. I tried to get out, tried to tell them I was done. They showed me pictures of my daughters, Ryder, pictures of them at school, at soccer practice, walking home. His voice cracked. They said if I didn't keep feeding them information, if I didn't help them track Ghost, they'd make sure I never saw my girls again. So you chose your family over your brother, wouldn't you? The question hung in the cold Colorado air. Ryder didn't have an answer, or maybe he did, and it was one he didn't want to face. Who else? Watson's voice cut through. Who else in the club is compromised? I don't know. I swear I don't know. The Grinders kept me isolated, fed me information on a need-to-know basis. I reported to one handler, never knew if there were others. Reaper's breathing was labored now. But Ryder, if they sent a federal agent to the clubhouse, if they're that confident about moving in the open, then they don't think we're a threat anymore. Ryder finished the thought. They think they've already won. Yeah. The word was barely a whisper. And maybe they have. Ryder ended the call, stood in the darkness with the wind cutting through his leather jacket and the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on his shoulders. Around him, 17 bikers waited because 2 had stayed behind to guard the clubhouse, faces shadowed in the ambient light from distant highway traffic. Eli had moved closer, standing a few feet away, arms wrapped around himself. What do we do? That was the question, wasn't it? What did they do when the enemy had badges, resources, federal authority? What did they do when the evidence they'd risked everything to recover was gone? What did they do when the game was rigged and the house always won? Ryder looked at Watson, at Torque, at the rest of his brothers, saw the same calculation happening behind their eyes, the same grim acceptance that they'd ridden into something bigger and more dangerous than they'd understood. We keep going, Ryder said finally. We get to Milford. We open that safety deposit box. We get whatever's inside. And then we make a choice about what kind of men we want to be. Even if it's a trap? Torquay asked. Especially if it's a trap. Ryder's voice was hard. Because if the Grinders think we're going to roll over and die just because they've got federal protection, they've forgotten what it means to ride with the Black Vultures. We don't quit. We don't surrender. And we sure as hell don't abandon our brothers, even the dead ones. Ryder. Watson's voice was careful. If we do this, if we go up against corrupt feds and a crew that's willing to poison innocent women and hunt kids, we're not coming back from this. Not clean. Maybe not at all. I know. And you're still going? Yeah. Ryder looked at Eli, at the boy who'd walked into their lives carrying his father's ghost and refused to let them forget what they'd done. We're still going. Watson nodded slowly. So did Torque. One by one, the rest of the convoy signaled their agreement, a brotherhood bound by guilt and determination, riding toward either redemption or annihilation. They mounted up again. Engines roared back to life, and the convoy pushed deeper into Colorado, chasing shadows and truth in equal measure. 3 hours later, they rolled into Milford just past midnight. The town was small, maybe 2,000 people, the kind of place that existed because a mine had once operated nearby and nobody had bothered to leave after it closed. Main Street stretched 3 blocks, anchored by a gas station on one end and a bar on the other. Everything in between looked tired, worn down by winter and poverty and too many years of nothing changing. Ryder led the convoy to a motel on the edge of town. Single story, parking lot full of potholes, neon sign that flickered vacancy in blue and red. The kind of place that didn't ask questions as long as your cash was green. He got them 4 rooms, paid extra for the clerk to forget he'd seen 19 bikers check in at midnight with a kid in tow. They gathered in the largest room, door locked, curtains drawn. Jake pulled out a laptop and the USB drive that hadn't been confiscated, started going through the files while the rest of them tried to figure out their next move. Bank opens at 9, Dutch said, checking his phone. First Bank of Milford, 2 blocks from here. Small operation, probably 3 employees total. Security? Watson asked. 1 camera outside, maybe 1 inside. Old system, nothing fancy. Dutch looked up. But if the feds know we're here, they could be watching the bank. So we assume they're watching. Ryder paced the small room, mind working through scenarios. Question is what they're waiting for. They could have grabbed us on the road if they wanted. Could have had state police pull us over, find some reason to arrest us all. Us. Unless they want us to lead them to the evidence. Torque lit a cigarette, cracked the window despite the cold. They know we've got a key. They know we're going to that bank. Maybe they're waiting to see what's inside the deposit box before they move. That's what I'd do. Ryder stopped pacing, stood at the window, peering through a gap in the curtains at the dark street outside. Let us do the work, then swoop in and take everything. So we don't give them the chance. Eli spoke from where he sat on the edge of one of the beds, still wearing the too big leather jacket, looking like a kid playing dress-up in his father's clothes. We go in, get what's inside, and get out before they can react. It's not that simple, kid. Jake didn't look up from the laptop screen. Banks have protocols. Safety deposit boxes require ID, signature verification. We can't just grab and run. Actually, Eli reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a worn envelope. We can. He opened it, spread the contents on the bed. A Colorado driver's license in Ghost's name, a bank card with a number that matched the key, and a letter, written in Ghost's handwriting, addressed to the First Bank of Milford, to whom it may concern. In the event of my death or disappearance, my son, Eli James Mercer, is authorized to access Safety Deposit Box 247. He carries my key and this letter as proof of identity and intent. Please extend him every courtesy. The letter was notarized, dated 3 years and 4 months ago, right before Ghost stopped sending letters to Eli's mother. He knew. Eli's voice was hollow. He knew he might not make it back, so he made sure I could get to the evidence without him. Ryder felt something twist in his chest. Ghost had been preparing for his own death while simultaneously fighting to stay alive, planning for failure while refusing to accept it. The contradiction was heartbreaking. Does that work legally? Watson asked Jake. Maybe. Depends on the bank's policies, how seriously they take the notarization. Jake squinted at the letter. But it's better than nothing. At least gives the kid a legitimate reason to be there. Then we do it first thing. Ryder turned from the window. Eli goes in with Watson. 2 of them, middle-aged man with his nephew, nothing suspicious. Rest of us spread out, watch the street, ready to move if things go sideways. And if the feds are waiting inside, Torque asked, then we find out how bad they want to keep this buried. They spent the next hour going through Jake's findings on the USB drive. It was worse than Ryder had imagined. The ledger Ghost had compiled didn't just document the grinder's operations through Black Vulture's territory. It showed connections to other crews in 3 states. Showed shipments of something called Blue Horizon, a synthetic drug that was flooding the Midwest, killing users by the dozens. Showed payments to law enforcement at multiple levels, local cops, county sheriffs, and yes, federal agents. Agent Thomas Briggs' name appeared 17 times in the ledger, along with dates, amounts, specific cases he'd sabotaged, or evidence he'd destroyed. Ghost had been building a case that would have taken down not just the grinders, but an entire network of corruption that stretched from Missouri to Colorado to Nebraska. No wonder they'd wanted him dead. This is bigger than we thought, Jake said, voice tight. This isn't just some biker crew running drugs. This is organized crime with federal protection. This is the kind of thing that gets people disappeared. Like Ghost, Eli whispered. Yeah. Ryder sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. Like Ghost. The room fell silent except for the hum of the motel's heating system struggling against the cold. Outside, a car passed by slowly, tires crunching on gravel. Everyone tensed until the sound faded into the distance. We should get some sleep, Watson said finally. Gonna need to be sharp tomorrow. Nobody moved. Sleep felt impossible with the weight of what they knew pressing down on them. But Ryder nodded, started dividing up the rooms, assigning watch shifts. Someone would stay awake at all times, monitoring the parking lot, watching for black sedans or federal agents or anything else that might signal the trap closing around them. Eli ended up in Ryder's room, curled up on one of the beds, fully clothed, too exhausted to even take off his boots. Ryder sat in a chair by the window, gun within reach, watching the boy sleep fitfully. Every few minutes, Eli would jerk awake, eyes wide with panic, then slowly relax again when he remembered where he was. Around 4 in the morning, Eli sat up, breathing hard. I had a dream about him. Ryder turned from the window. Your father? Yeah, he was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't hear him. There was too much noise. Engines, gunfire, screaming. Eli wrapped his arms around his knees. Do you think he suffered when they killed him? The question was asked in a child's voice, seeking comfort, even while expecting none. I don't know, Ryder said honestly. I hope not, but Ghost was tough. Whatever happened, he wouldn't have gone easy. That's not comforting. No, but it's true. Ryder stood, moved to sit on the edge of the other bed. Your father was one of the bravest men I ever knew. Not because he wasn't scared, but because he did what needed doing even when he was terrified. That's real courage. I'm scared, Eli admitted. About tomorrow. About what we're going to find. Good. Fear keeps you alive. Ryder's voice softened. But don't let it paralyze you. When things get bad, and they might get bad, you remember that you've already survived worse. You've already lost your mother. You've already made it 1,000 miles with people hunting you. Compared to that, walking into a bank is nothing. Eli nodded slowly. Ryder, if something happens to me, if the grinders catch me, they won't. But if they do... The boy's eyes were fierce despite his fear. Promise me you'll finish this. Promise me you'll make sure everyone knows my father wasn't what you thought he was. I promise. Ryder met his gaze. But nothing's going to happen to you. You're under Black Vulture's protection now. That means something. What if it's not enough? Ryder didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't know if it would be enough. The enemy had resources they couldn't match, connections they couldn't break, authority they couldn't challenge. All the Black Vultures had was determination and a willingness to bleed for what was right. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it wasn't. Dawn came cold and gray, painting the world in shades of ash. They gathered in Ryder's room at 8, checking weapons, running through the plan one more time. Eli looked small beside Watson, the leather jacket hanging off his shoulders, but his jaw was set with determination that made him seem older. Remember, Ryder told him, you go in, you ask for access to the box, you take what's inside, you leave. Don't talk more than necessary. Don't make eye contact with anyone who looks official. In and out, 5 minutes, max. What if they ask questions? Watson handles it. You're just a grieving kid looking for closure. Let him do the talking. They headed out at 8:30, convoy splitting up. Watson and Eli walked the 2 blocks to the bank while the rest scattered across town. Some at the gas station, some in the diner across the street, some positioned at both ends of Main Street watching for approaching vehicles. Ryder took position in an alley with a clear view of the bank's entrance. Torque was with him, rifle hidden beneath his jacket, eyes scanning constantly. The morning was quiet. A few cars passed, a couple of early risers walking dogs. Everything normal, too normal. Don't like this, Torque muttered. Feels wrong. Everything about this feels wrong. Ryder checked his phone. But we're committed now. At 8:45, the bank's lights came on. 3 minutes later, an employee unlocked the front door. Watson and Eli waited another minute, then walked inside. The seconds crawled past like hours. Ryder's hand stayed near his gun. His eyes tracked every car, every pedestrian, every shadow that might conceal a threat. The street remained empty. No black sedans, no federal agents, nothing. 5 minutes passed. Watson and Eli should have been coming out by now. 6 minutes, 7. Something's wrong, Torque said. Ryder was already moving, crossing the street with purpose but not panic, Torque falling in behind him. They pushed through the bank's door into a small lobby. 3 teller windows, a desk for loans, a back area where the safety deposit boxes would be. The place was empty. No Watson. No Eli. No employees. Just an eerie silence broken by the hum of fluorescent lights and a radio playing softly somewhere in the back. "Watson," Ryder called out. No answer. They moved deeper into the bank, hands on weapons now, every instinct screaming danger. The back area was accessed through a heavy door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." It stood slightly ajar. Ryder pushed it open. Inside was a small room lined with safety deposit boxes on one wall. In the center sat a table. On the table sat an open box, number 247, and its contents spread out for display. And standing behind the table, gun drawn and pointed at Watson and Eli, was Agent Thomas Briggs. He wasn't alone. 2 other men flanked him, also armed, also wearing FBI jackets that might or might not be legitimate. The bank employees were zip-tied in the corner, eyes wide with terror. "Ryder Kane." Briggs smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I was wondering when you'd show up. Please, come in. Bring your friend. Close the door behind you. Let's keep this civilized." Ryder didn't move. His gun was in his hand, but Briggs had the drop on them, had hostages, had all the leverage. Watson stood rigid next to Eli, one hand on the boy's shoulder, face carved from stone. "Civilized," Ryder repeated. "That what you call poisoning a woman and hunting a kid across 3 states? That was unfortunate," Briggs shrugged, "but necessary. The Mercer woman wouldn't tell us where Ghost hid the ledger. And the boy?" He looked at Eli with something like pity. "Well, he's been a loose end we've been meaning to tie up for a while now." "You're not FBI," Torque said from behind Ryder. "Oh, but I am. 16 years with the Bureau, clean record, multiple commendations. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you know how to work the system." Briggs gestured to the contents of the safety deposit box. "And speaking of working the system, let's talk about what Ghost left for you. Because it's not quite what you were expecting." "Poperi osipo eats." Ryder's eyes dropped to the table. There was a ledger, yes, but also something else. A stack of photographs. And at the top of that stack, a picture that made his blood turn to ice. It showed Ghost with another man, arms around each other's shoulders, laughing at some shared joke. The photo was dated 6 months before Ghost's exile. And the man in the picture with Ghost, the man who looked like his closest friend in the world, was someone Ryder recognized instantly. Because it was Grizz. Grizz, who'd called loudest for Ghost's exile. Grizz, who'd made sure the vote happened quickly. Grizz, who'd spent 9 years making sure nobody questioned the official story. "That's right," Briggs said softly, watching Ryder's face. "Your sergeant-at-arms was working with Ghost. Knew everything. Was helping him gather evidence. Right up until the moment the grinders got to him and explained exactly what would happen to his grandchildren if he didn't play along. The world stopped making sense. "No," Ryder heard himself say. Grizz was a good man who made an impossible choice," Briggs interrupted. "Just like Reaper. Just like all of you, eventually." Everyone breaks, Kane. Everyone has something they value more than their principles. The only question is whether you find that thing before or after people start dying. He raised his gun, pointed it directly at Eli's head. "So here's how this works. You're going to put your weapons on the floor. You're going to step back. You're going to watch while I take the boy and everything in this box. And then you're going to ride back to Missouri and forget any of this ever happened. And if we don't?" Ryder's voice was steady despite the rage and horror churning through him. "Then I shoot the kid. Then I shoot Watson. Then I shoot you. Then I burn down your clubhouse with everyone inside it." Briggs' smile widened. "And I get away with it, because I'm a federal agent, and you're just outlaws nobody will miss." The silence that followed was absolute. Ryder looked at Eli, at the boy who'd trusted them, who'd believed they could make things right, who'd walked into hell because his father had told him the Black Vultures were men of honor. And Ryder understood, finally, what Ghost had known 9 years ago. That sometimes honor meant losing, that sometimes doing the right thing got you killed, that sometimes the world was simply broken beyond repair, and all you could do was choose how you wanted to die. Ryder's finger tightened on the trigger. Ryder's finger tightened on the trigger, but his mind was racing faster than his heart. 3 guns pointed at Watson and Eli. 2 more men he couldn't see behind him in the lobby. Bank employees zip-tied and terrified. Every angle covered, every exit blocked. A perfect trap sprung at the exact moment they thought they were winning. But Agent Briggs had made one mistake. He was talking when he should have been shooting. "You've got 3 seconds to put the guns down," Briggs said, eyes locked on Ryder. 3, 2. The explosion came from outside. Not an actual explosion. The sound of 19 Harley-Davidson engines roaring to life simultaneously. A thunderous wave of mechanical fury that shook the bank's windows in their frames. Briggs' eyes flickered toward the sound for just a fraction of a second. Ryder moved. He didn't shoot Briggs. Couldn't risk the return fire hitting Eli. Instead, he dove sideways, crashing into Torque, driving them both through the doorway back into the main lobby. Gunfire erupted behind them. 3 shots. 4, punching holes in the doorframe where Ryder's head had been a second earlier. Wood splinters exploded like shrapnel. "Go!" Watson's voice roared from inside the room. More gunshots. The sound of bodies colliding. Glass shattering. Ryder rolled to his feet, brought his gun up. One of the men from the lobby was rushing toward him, FBI jacket flapping open to reveal body armor underneath. Ryder fired twice, center mass, no effect. The man kept coming. 3rd shot took him in the throat. He went down hard, choking, hands clawing at the wound. Torque was already at the front door, rifle up, covering the street. "We got company! Black SUV! 2 vehicles coming in fast from the east!" The motorcycles outside roared louder. Through the bank's front windows, Ryder could see his brothers forming a wall of steel and leather between the bank entrance and the approaching vehicles. Dutch at the front, shotgun across his handlebars. Jake beside him, Crow, Bones, all of them positioning themselves like they were preparing to hold Thermopylae against the Persian army. Another gunshot from the back room. Watson came through the doorway, moving backward, firing blindly behind him, one arm wrapped around Eli, physically carrying the boy. Blood streaked Watson's face from a cut above his eye. The boy was screaming something Ryder couldn't make out over the chaos. "Out!" Ryder grabbed Watson's jacket, pulled them toward the door. "Now, Isha!" They hit the exit as the SUVs screeched to a stop in the street. Doors flew open. Men in tactical gear poured out, rifles coming up. But the black vultures were already moving, bikes surging forward, not attacking but creating a moving barrier of chrome and noise between the shooters and their targets. "Get him on a bike!" Dutch bellowed over the engine roar. Watson practically threw Eli onto the back of Ryder's Harley. The boy's hands scrabbled for purchase, grabbed onto Ryder's jacket with a grip like death itself. Ryder twisted the throttle, the Sportster lunging forward. Behind him, Watson was mounting his own bike. Torque was already rolling, rifle slung across his back. Gunfire erupted. Gunfire. The tactical team opened up with automatic weapons. Bullets sparked off asphalt, shattered a motorcycle's mirrors, punched through a gas station sign. The black vultures scattered like a bomb had detonated in their midst, bikes screaming in every direction. But they weren't running, they were flanking. Dutch and 3 others peeled left, cutting down a side street. Jake led 4 more right. The rest formed up behind Ryder in a tight V formation, engines screaming, creating a sound barrier of pure mechanical aggression that drowned out the gunfire. Ryder didn't look back. Couldn't afford to. He leaned into the Sportster's power, feeling Eli pressed against his back like a second skin, the boy's heart hammering so hard Ryder could feel it through both their jackets. The speedometer climbed, 40, 50, 60, on a residential street that should have had a limit of 25. "Hold on!" he roared back at Eli. The boy's only response was to grip tighter. Behind them, the SUVs were trying to pursue, but 19 motorcycles could go places SUVs couldn't, through gaps between parked cars, over curbs, down alleys barely wide enough for handlebars. The convoy split and reformed like a school of fish evading sharks, each rider instinctively knowing where the others would be, reading the flow of traffic and terrain with the kind of precision that only came from years of riding together. A police car appeared at an intersection ahead, lights flashing. Ryder didn't slow down. He gunned the engine, blasted through the red light with inches to spare, the police car's siren dopplering away behind him. The cop didn't pursue. Smart. One patrol car against 19 angry bikers was suicide. They hit the highway doing 80, the convoy reforming into tight formation. Ryder risked a glance in his mirror, counted bikes. 17, 18, 19. Everyone had made it, no one down. But they weren't clear yet. His phone buzzed against his chest. He couldn't answer it. 30 seconds later, Watson pulled up alongside him, phone pressed to his ear, shouting something Ryder couldn't hear over the wind and engines. Watson gestured frantically, pointing back the way they'd come, then making a cutting motion across his throat. They were being followed. Ryder looked back. Nothing visible yet. But if Watson said they had a tail, they had a tail. He signaled the convoy, 2 fingers down, rapid pump. Emergency scatter protocol. The formation exploded outward, bikes peeling off in groups of 2 and 3, each heading in different directions, making themselves harder to track, harder to catch. Ryder kept the Sportster pinned, staying with Watson and Torque. 3 bikes, 1 destination, the only place they had left to go. Back to Missouri. Back to the clubhouse. Back to where this all started. They rode for 2 hours straight, pushing the bikes to their limits, burning through gas at a rate that would have them running dry before they hit the state line. At a truck stop outside Hays, Kansas, they finally pulled off, rolling into a bay beside idling semis, hidden from the highway by walls of steel and diesel smoke. Eli practically fell off the bike. His legs gave out. Ryder caught him before he hit the concrete, held the boy upright while he found his balance. The kid's face was pale as paper, lips blue from the cold and the adrenaline crash. "You okay?" Eli nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again. What just happened? We got out." Ryder guided him toward the gas pumps. "That's what happened." "Watson's hit," Torque said quietly, dismounting his own bike. Ryder's head snapped around. Watson was still sitting on his Harley, one hand pressed to his side, leather jacket dark with blood that looked black in the harsh fluorescent light of the truck stop. "How bad?" "Through and through. Missed anything important." Watson's voice was steady, but tight with pain. "Just need to pack it. Keep riding." "Like hell." Ryder moved to him, tried to pull the jacket back to see the wound. Watson batted his hand away. "We don't have time. They're still coming. We stop for more than 15 minutes. They catch us." Watson's eyes were hard. "I can make it to Missouri. I've ridden through worse." That was probably true. Watson had taken a knife to the gut 5 years ago, breaking up a bar fight, rode himself to the emergency room, and was back on his bike 3 days later. But this was different. This was a gunshot. This was blood loss and potential infection and 100 things that could go wrong. "We need to..." "Ryder." Watson grabbed his arm, squeezed hard enough to hurt. "Focus. We got bigger problems than a hole in my side." He was right. Ryder forced himself to think past the immediate crisis. They'd escaped the bank, but they'd left the ledger behind, left the evidence, left everything Ghost had died protecting. All they had was Eli, the USB drive Jake still carried somewhere behind them in the scattered convoy, and a rapidly diminishing head start. "Did you see what was in the box?" Ryder asked. "Before Briggs showed up?" Watson nodded, winced. More than just the ledger. Ghost had recordings. Voice recordings of conversations with the Grinders, with Briggs, with... He stopped, jaw working. With Grizz. The name hung in the cold Kansas air like an executioner's blade. "How bad?" Ryder's voice was flat. "Bad enough that if those recordings go public, Grizz goes to prison for the rest of his life. Maybe all of us do." Watson pulled his hand away from his side, looked at the blood coating his palm. "Ghost recorded everything, including the club meetings where we voted to exile him. Including conversations where Grizz admitted he knew Ghost was innocent, but couldn't speak up without getting his grandkids killed. Otzi." Whoa. Eli made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. "My father recorded you betraying him?" "Yeah." Watson's eyes were haunted. He recorded it all, because he knew someday someone would need to hear the truth, even if that truth destroyed the only family he had left. Ryder's phone buzzed. He pulled it out. Dutch. He answered. "Where are you?" "Gipa." Dutch's voice was tight. "Truck stop outside Hays. Watson's hit. We're regrouping." "Copy that. Listen, we've got a situation. I'm with Jake and 4 others. We split off like you signaled, but there's a problem with the USB drive." Ryder's stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "It's corrupted. Jake tried to access the files, double-check what we had. Most of it's there, but some of the key documents are damaged, unreadable. We've got maybe 60% of what Ghost compiled. That's not enough. I know, but it gets worse. Jake did some digging while we were riding. The files that are corrupted, they're the ones with the federal connections, Briggs's payoffs, the other agents involved, the stuff that proves this goes higher than just the grinders. Ryder closed his eyes. Of course, the most important evidence would be the first to fail. Can he recover it? He's trying, but he needs time, needs equipment we don't have on the road. Says if he can get to a real computer, maybe pull the raw data, he might be able to reconstruct some of it. How long? Hours. Maybe days. And that's if it's even possible. Ryder looked at Eli, at Watson's blood-soaked jacket, at Torque standing watch with his rifle, scanning the highway for pursuit. Looked at the pieces of a broken plan scattered across 3 states. Where's everyone else? He asked Dutch. Scattered. Last check-in, everyone was clear. No one else hit. But Ryder? Dutch's voice dropped lower. We got another call. From the clubhouse. Grizz is gone. The world tilted. Gone how? Left an hour ago. Alone. Wouldn't say where he was going. Wouldn't answer his phone. Crow tried to follow him, but Grizz lost him on purpose. Whoever he's meeting, he doesn't want us knowing about it. Ryder felt something cold and terrible spreading through his chest. He's running. Or he's making a deal. Dutch paused. Ryder, if Grizz talks to the feds, if he cuts a deal to save himself, then everyone in the club goes down. Ryder finished the thought. Everyone who knew, everyone who helped, everyone who wore the patch. Yeah. The silence on the line was crushing. In the background, Ryder could hear highway noise, wind, the distant rumble of motorcycles idling, his brothers, his family, all of them potentially hours away from federal indictments because 9 years ago they'd believed a lie and exiled an innocent man. Rally point, Ryder said, making the decision. Everyone converges on the clubhouse. We settle this there. All of us. Whatever comes. You sure? That's the first place they'll look. I know. But we're done running. We're done hiding. We started this in that clubhouse 9 years ago. We're going to finish it there. Ryder's voice hardened. And if Grizz shows up, we're going to get the truth out of him one way or another. Copy that. We'll see you there. The line went dead. Ryder turned to Watson and Torque. We're going back. Into the fire. Torque nodded slowly. About damn time. They gassed up the bikes, bought supplies from the truck stop, bandages, antiseptic, energy drinks, cigarettes. Watson refused anything stronger than ibuprofen for his gunshot wound, said he needed to stay sharp. Eli sat on a curb outside, arms wrapped around his knees, rocking slightly. The adrenaline had fully left his system now, replaced by shock and exhaustion. Ryder crouched beside him. You still with me? Ask me. I don't understand. Eli's voice was small. My father had all that evidence. He had recordings, proof, everything. Why didn't he just send it to someone? Why did he keep it hidden? Because the people he needed to send it to were the same people trying to kill him. Ryder pulled out his cigarettes, lit one, let the smoke settle his nerves. Your father figured out that the corruption went all the way up, that there was no one he could trust with that evidence except us, and we'd already turned our backs on him. So he died for nothing. No. Ryder's voice was firm. He died trying to protect you and your mother. He died fighting. That's not nothing. But we don't have the evidence anymore. Briggs has it, which means... Eli's voice cracked. Which means they win. Not yet they don't. Ryder took a long drag on the cigarette. Your father kept copies. Multiple copies. The USB drive was just one. There's still whatever's on that drive that Jake can recover. And there's one more thing your father left behind. What? You. Ryder looked at the boy. You're his evidence. You're his testimony. You know what happened to your mother. You know about the men who came looking for the ledger. You know about your father's letters. That's evidence, too. I'm 13 years old. Who's going to believe me? More people than you think. Ryder stood, ground out the cigarette under his boot. Come on. We've got a long ride ahead of us. They mounted up again, engines roaring back to life. This time Ryder felt different about the Sportster beneath him. It wasn't just a bike anymore. It was Ghost's bike. Ghost's last ride. Every mile they covered on it was a mile Ghost never got to take. Every stretch of highway was a road back toward the truth he'd died trying to reach. The convoy reformed as they rode east, bikes appearing from side roads and on-ramps, falling into formation without needing to be told. By the time they crossed back into Missouri, they were 19 strong again, battered, bleeding in Watson's case, but unbroken. The sun was setting as they approached the clubhouse, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood. Long shadows stretched across the gravel road. The building looked different somehow, more fortress than home, more tomb than sanctuary. Dutch was waiting in the parking lot, along with 4 prospects who'd been left behind to guard the place. His face was grim. "Grizz?" Ryder asked, killing his engine. "Not back yet, but you've got visitors." Dutch jerked his head toward the clubhouse. "Inside, been waiting for 2 hours. Said they're not leaving until they talk to you." Ryder's hand went to his gun. "Federal?" "No, worse." Dutch's expression was unreadable. "It's Ghost's widow." For a moment, Ryder couldn't process the words, Ghost's widow. But Ghost's widow was dead. Eli's mother was dead. Cancer, the boy had said. Buried 2 weeks before he showed up at the diner. Unless she wasn't. Ryder looked at Eli. The boy had gone rigid, face drained of all color. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, in a whisper that barely carried over the wind, "Mom?" He was off the bike and running before Ryder could stop him, legs pumping, too big jacket flapping behind him. He hit the clubhouse door at a full sprint, crashed through it into the main room. Ryder followed, Watson and the others close behind. Inside, sitting in a chair by the fire, was a woman. Late 30s, thin to the point of frailty. Dark hair streaked with gray. Hollow cheeks and eyes that had seen too much pain. She wore a hospital bracelet on her wrist and a heavy coat that couldn't quite hide how sick she was. But she was alive. Eli stopped 3 feet from her, frozen. "You're dead." They said, "I saw—" "I know, baby." Her voice was rough, damaged. "I know what you saw. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Is. You died." Eli's voice cracked into a scream. "I buried you. I stood at your grave and I—" He couldn't finish, couldn't breathe. His legs gave out. Gave. The woman was on her feet instantly despite her obvious weakness, catching him, pulling him against her chest, both of them sinking to the floor in a tangle of limbs and grief. Ryder stood in the doorway, unable to move, unable to process what he was seeing. Watson pushed past him, went to one knee beside the woman. "Ma'am, Sarah Mercer?" She looked up, eyes streaming. "Yes, I was Ghost's wife." "We thought you were dead." "I was supposed to be." She held Eli tighter, the boy sobbing into her shoulder. "They poisoned me. At work. Just like Eli told you. But I didn't die. Not completely. The doctor said it was a miracle. I said it was my son. I couldn't die while he was still out there alone." "But Eli said he buried you." "What? He buried a casket. There's no body inside it. Just wait." Sarah's voice was steady despite the tears. "I faked my death. Got help from a nurse who believed my story. We made it look real enough to fool anyone watching, and then I disappeared." "Why?" Ryder found his voice. "Why fake your death and send your son away alone?" Sarah looked at him with eyes that burned with something between rage and desperation. "Because they were coming for him next, the grinders. They figured out I didn't have the information they wanted. So they were going to take Eli instead, use him to force Ghost out of hiding. I couldn't let that happen. So you sent him to us." Understanding crashed over Ryder like a wave. "You sent him here knowing we'd protect him." Ghost told me in his letters. He said if anything ever happened to both of us, to send Eli to the Black Vultures. He said you were the only family that mattered, the only people who would keep him safe no matter what. Her jaw tightened. "He also said you'd destroyed him, exiled him, believed he was a traitor, but he still trusted you with his son's life." The words hit harder than bullets. Ryder looked at Eli, at the boy clutching his mother like she might disappear again if he let go. Looked at the brothers behind him, all of them standing witness to Ghost's final act of faith in a club that had failed him in every way that mattered. Where have you been? Watson asked quietly. Since you died? Sir, Mershan, hospital, different name, cash payments, trying to recover enough that I could come get my son back. Sarah's voice wavered. But then I heard about the raid, about federal agents at this clubhouse, about a shootout in Colorado, and I knew I couldn't wait anymore. How did you hear about Colorado, Torres? Torque's voice was sharp. That happened 4 hours ago. Sarah met his eyes. Because someone called me. Someone who knew Ghost. Someone who said, if I wanted to save my son, I needed to get to Missouri immediately. Who? Ryder's hand was on his gun again. Who called you? He didn't give me his name, just said he was an old friend trying to make things right. She pulled something from her pocket, a burner phone. He's been texting me updates. Told me when you left Colorado, when you crossed into Kansas, when you were 20 minutes out from here. She held up the phone. The most recent message glowed on the screen. They're here. Tell them Grizz says he's sorry. Tell them the grinders are coming. Tell them it ends tonight. The clubhouse door exploded inward. Not figuratively, actually exploded. Detonation cord wrapped around the frame, triggered remotely, blowing the door off its hinges in a shower of splinters and smoke. Bodies poured through the gap, tactical team, body armor, automatic weapons. But not FBI. The patches on their backs said Grinders MC. Gunfire erupted. The black vultures scattered, returning fire, using tables and the bar for cover. Eli's mother threw herself over her son, shielding him with her body. Ryder fired twice, dropped one attacker, dove behind a support beam as bullets chewed through the wall where his head had been. Watson was already moving despite his wound, clearing leather, shooting with both hands. Torque's rifle barked once, twice, dropping attackers in the doorway. But more kept coming. Too many. They'd brought an army. Back doors, Dutch roared. They fought their way toward the rear exit, laying down covering fire. Sarah half-carried, half-dragged Eli, the boy's eyes wide with shock. They burst through the back door into the parking lot where the motorcycles waited, and found themselves surrounded. 20 more grinders. In a perfect perimeter, weapons raised, no escape. Standing at the center of them, looking older and more tired than Ryder had ever seen him, was Grizz. His hands were zip-tied, his face was bruised, blood leaked from a split lip. But his eyes were clear when they met Ryder's. I'm sorry, the old biker said quietly. I tried to warn you, tried to give you time to run, but they got to me first. You sold us out. Ryder's voice was hollow. No. Grizz shook his head. I sold Ghost out 9 years ago. Tonight I tried to buy him back. Guess I'm too late for that too. A figure stepped forward from the circle of grinders. Tall, lean, expensive suit under a leather jacket. Face like carved granite. This was the man in charge. Had to be. Ryder Kane. The man's voice was smooth, educated. Wrong for someone wearing a grinder's patch. I'm Vincent Corelli. We need to talk. Got nothing to say to you. Oh, I think you do. Corelli smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Because I have something you want, and you have something I want, and there's a very simple transaction we can make here that ends with everyone walking away alive. I doubt that. Well, smart man. Corelli's smile widened. But let me make my offer anyway. You give me the USB drive. You give me the boy. You give me every piece of evidence Ghost compiled over the last 9 years. And in return, I let you and your brothers ride away. Clean, no pursuit, no retaliation. You go back to being a small-time MC in Missouri, and we forget this ever happened. And if we refuse? Boy, said. Corelli pulled a gun, pressed it to Grizz's temple. Then I start executing your brothers one by one until you change your mind. Starting with the old man who already betrayed you once. 19 bikers, 40 grinders, surrounded, outgunned, nowhere to run. Ryder looked at his brothers, at Watson bleeding through his jacket, at Torque ready to die fighting, at Dutch with his shotgun pointed at 5 men, at Eli clutching his mother, both of them shaking, at Grizz with a gun to his head, the old biker who'd helped destroy Ghost and was now paying the price. This was the moment The point where it all came down, where they either surrendered everything Ghost had died for, or they fought and died trying to finish what he'd started. Ryder's hand tightened on his gun. Then headlights flooded the parking lot, dozens of them, cutting through the darkness like cavalry arriving at dawn. Motorcycles, hundreds of them, pouring down the gravel road in a river of chrome and thunder. Different patches, different clubs. Red Kings, Iron Disciples, Venom MC, Road Saints. Crews from 4 states, all converging on this spot at this moment. And leading them, on a bike that should have been junked years ago, was a figure Ryder would have known anywhere. Scarred leather jacket, gray in his beard, eyes hollow from too many years in hiding, but alive. Still alive. Ghost had come home. The grinders turned, weapons swinging toward the new arrivals. But they were already flanked, already surrounded. 200 bikers forming a steel wall around the clubhouse, cutting off every escape route. Ghost killed his engine, sat for a moment, just breathing. Then he swung off the bike and walked toward Ryder with the slow, measured pace of a man who'd already died once and didn't fear it happening again. "Sorry I'm late." His voice was rough, damaged from years of not using it much. Had to gather some friends first. Corelli's gun was still pressed to Grizz's head, but his composure had cracked. His eyes darted around the parking lot, calculating odds, finding none in his favor. "This doesn't change anything," he said, but his voice wavered. "You shoot me. My men kill all of you." "Maybe." Ghost stopped 10 feet away, eyes locked on Corelli. "Or maybe your men realize they're outnumbered 10 to 1 and decide dying for you isn't worth the paycheck." The grinders shifted, looking at each other, looking at the overwhelming force surrounding them. Some of them were already lowering weapons. "You were dead," Ryder's voice cracked. "The journal, the last entry. You said they found you." "They did." Ghost never looked away from Corelli. "Ambushed me in Colorado, shot me, left me for dead in the mountains. Would have died too if some hikers hadn't found me. Spent 6 months in a coma. Another year learning to walk again. By the time I was functional, my wife and son were gone. Disappeared. I spent 2 years tracking them, making sure they were safe from a distance. And preparing for this?" He gestured to the army of bikers behind him. "Called in every favor I'd earned in 20 years of riding, every crew I'd helped, every brother I'd bled with, told them the truth about what happened, about the grinders, about the corruption. And I asked them for one thing." Ghost's voice was iron. "I asked them to help me end it." Corelli's gun hand trembled. "You can't." "Can't what? Take you down? Watch." Ghost pulled something from his jacket. A phone. He tapped the screen. "That's a live feed going to 15 news stations, 20 FBI field offices, and the Department of Justice. Everything. Every name, every transaction, every corrupt agent, every murder. All of it. Already sent. Already out there. You pull that trigger. It doesn't stop anything. You're already done." The silence that followed was absolute. Then Grizz moved. Despite the gun to his head, despite the zip ties, he threw himself backward into Corelli, knocking the weapon up. The shot went wild. And 19 black vultures plus 200 allied bikers surged forward as one. The grinders broke, scattered, dropped weapons. Those who didn't were swarmed under, disarmed, restrained. In less than 30 seconds, it was over. Corelli was face down in the gravel, 5 bikers holding him down. His men were zip-tied, surrounded, finished. Ryder stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened, unable to accept that Ghost was standing 15 feet away. Alive, breathing, real. Then Eli's voice cut through the chaos. "Dad?" Ghost's head snapped around. His eyes found his son, found Sarah standing behind him, tears streaming down her face. The hardness in Ghost's expression shattered. "Eli." The name came out like a prayer. "Sarah." He was moving before he finished speaking, crossing the distance, dropping to his knees in front of his family. Sarah fell into his arms. Eli crashed into both of them. The 3 of them held each other in the dirt and the darkness while 200 bikers stood guard, and Ryder finally understood what Ghost had been fighting for all these years. Not revenge, not justice, just this moment, his family, his son, his wife, safe, together. Home. Ryder felt Watson's hand on his shoulder, felt Torque move up beside him, felt his brothers surrounding him, all of them watching Ghost hold his family like they might disappear if he let go. "We need to call this in," Dutch said quietly. "Real FBI, clean ones, get Corelli and his men processed before someone with a badge shows up and tries to take over." "Do it." Ryder's voice was hollow. "And Dutch? Find out who in the Bureau we can trust. Because Ghost is right. This isn't over. There's still corrupt agents out there. Still people who want this buried. On it." The parking lot slowly organized itself into chaos with purpose. Grinders being restrained and loaded into vehicles, evidence being documented, calls being made to lawyers, to contacts in law enforcement, to anyone who might help protect what they'd just accomplished. Ghost eventually stood, his family still pressed against him. He met Ryder's eyes across the parking lot. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. 9 years of betrayal and guilt and grief between them. Then Ghost walked toward him, every step deliberate. They stood face to face. Ryder couldn't find words. Ryder couldn't think of anything that would undo what he'd done, what they'd all done. "I'm sorry" seemed too small. Ghost's fist crashed into his jaw. Ryder went down hard, ears ringing, tasting blood. He didn't get up, didn't try to defend himself, just lay there accepting it as the least of what he deserved. Ghost stood over him, breathing hard. "That's for not believing me, for turning your back, for making me lose 9 years with my family." "I know." Ryder spat blood. "I know. And this?" Ghost extended his hand. "This is for keeping my son alive, for bringing my wife back, for finally doing what I always knew you would do if you just got out of your own way and remembered what brotherhood actually means." Ryder looked at the offered hand, at the man he'd destroyed, at the brother who'd come back from the dead to save them all. He took it. Ghost pulled him up. They stood there, gripping each other's forearms. No words. Words weren't enough. Might never be enough, but it was a start. Behind them, sirens wailed in the distance, coming closer, real police this time, real federal agents. The ones who'd received Ghost's evidence dump and were racing to secure the scene before anyone could destroy what had been uncovered. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. The sirens grew louder, blue and red lights painting the clubhouse in colors that reminded Ryder of old wounds and older scars. Ghost still gripped his forearm, both men standing in the gravel while 200 bikers formed a protective circle around them and the chaos they'd created. Federal vehicles rolled down the access road in a convoy that would have been intimidating if they hadn't just faced down 40 grinders with nothing but determination and rage. Ryder's jaw throbbed where Ghost had hit him. Good. He deserved that and worse. "We need to get our stories straight," Watson said quietly, moving up beside them. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandage on his side, but he stood steady. "Before the clean feds get here and start asking questions we're not ready to answer." Ghost finally released Ryder's arm. His eyes tracked to where Sarah and Eli stood, surrounded by protective bikers, his wife holding their son like she'd never let go again. "There's only one story, the truth. All of it. No more lies, no more cover-ups. The truth gets us all charged with about 50 violations," Torque pointed out. "Harboring a fugitive, obstruction, weapons charges, interstate flight. That's just for starters. Maybe." Ghost's voice was tired but certain. "But it's also the only thing that clears the black vultures of being part of the Grinders operation. Right now, to anyone looking from the outside, your club looks dirty, corrupted. Part of the problem. The only way to fix that is full transparency." Ryder knew he was right, hated it, but knew it. "What about you? You've been in hiding for 9 years. They're going to have questions about where you were, what you've been doing. I'll answer them." Ghost pulled a cigarette from his pocket with hands that shook slightly. His lighter took 3 tries to catch. "I've been ready to answer them for years. Just needed to make sure my family was safe first. Now they are. So I'll face whatever comes." The lead federal vehicle stopped 20 feet away. Doors opened. 4 agents emerged, hands near weapons but not drawing, scanning the scene with the kind of professional wariness that said they'd walked into volatile situations before. The lead agent was a woman, mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, eyes that missed nothing. Her badge read, Special Agent Melissa Torres, DOJ. She took in the sea of motorcycles, the zip-tied grinders, Vincent Corelli face down and bleeding in the dirt, and the black vultures standing in defensive formation around two people who were clearly not bikers. Her expression never changed. "Someone want to tell me what the hell happened here?" Her voice carried across the parking lot without needing to be raised. Ghost stepped forward. "My name is Michael Mercer. 9 years ago, I was framed by members of the Grinders Motorcycle Club for theft and betrayal of my own club. I've spent the last 9 years gathering evidence against them and the corrupt federal agents on their payroll. Tonight, they tried to kill me, my family, and my brothers. We defended ourselves. That's what happened." Torres studied him for a long moment. "Michael Mercer, Ghost. We've been looking for you for 3 years. Ever since a Jane Doe in a Colorado hospital gave a statement about being ambushed and left for dead, then disappeared before we could follow up. That was me. You have proof of these accusations against federal agents? I sent you proof 3 hours ago. Recordings, financial records. Documented transactions between Agent Thomas Briggs and the Grinders going back 6 years. You should have received it already." Torres pulled out her phone, typed rapidly, waited. Her expression darkened as she read. "Agent Briggs is currently in custody in Colorado. Picked up 2 hours ago trying to cross state lines with approximately $3 million in cash and a fake passport. He's been read his rights, but hasn't said a word." "He won't," Ghost said. "Not until he knows whether the evidence against him is solid enough to convict. Once he knows it is, he'll start talking, offering deals, naming names." "You seem very certain about that. I've been studying him for 9 years. I know how he thinks." Torres gestured to her team. They moved forward carefully, starting to document the scene. "Photograph evidence. Take statements from the allied bikers who'd ridden in with Ghost. 2 more vehicles arrived, paramedics for Watson and the other wounded. Additional agents to help process 40 captured Grinders. We're going to need statements from all of you," Torres said to Ryder. "And I mean all of you, every member of the Black Vultures MC. This is going to be a long night." "We're not going anywhere," Ryder replied. His voice was steady despite the exhaustion threatening to pull him under. "We'll tell you everything, but first, that boy over there needs to see a doctor. And Ghost needs to see his family without 20 people watching. Bui?" Torres followed his gaze to where Eli still clung to his parents. Something softened in her expression. 5 minutes? Then I need to start interviews. And Mr. Mercer?" She looked back at Ghost. "Don't even think about running again." "I'm done running." Ghost ground out his cigarette under his boot. "I've been running for 9 years. Tonight I stand still, Schmitz." Torres nodded and moved away to coordinate her team. Ghost walked back to his family, and Ryder watched as Sarah reached for him. As Eli pulled him down into a 3-way embrace that looked like it was holding them all together at the molecular level. The boy was crying, Sarah was crying. Ghost's face was buried in his wife's hair, shoulders shaking. 9 years of separation, 9 years of believing each other dead or lost forever. And now this, reunion in a parking lot full of cops and criminals and broken men trying to figure out how to be whole again. Ryder turned away to give them privacy, found Watson leaning against a motorcycle, face pale, hand pressed to his side. "You need a hospital, like that. I need a cigarette and a bottle of whiskey. Hospital's third on the list." Watson's attempt at a smile came out more like a grimace. "That was close, brother." "Yeah." Ryder looked around at the controlled chaos, at Grizz being checked over by paramedics, the old biker refusing treatment for his facial injuries, at Torka giving a statement to a federal agent, his voice steady and factual, at Dutch coordinating with the allied clubs, making sure everyone's story was consistent before the interviews started. "Too close. Think we're going to prison?" Probably." Ryder's voice was flat. "Best case scenario, we get immunity for cooperation. Worst case, we all go down for harboring Ghost, obstructing justice, and about 50 other charges the prosecutor dreams up. Was it worth it?" Ryder looked back at Ghost and his family, at Eli's face pressed against his father's chest, at Sarah holding them both like she could physically keep the world from tearing them apart again, at the evidence being documented that would take down a corrupt network spanning 3 states and reaching into federal law enforcement. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It was worth it, The next 6 hours were a blur of statements and evidence collection and federal agents swarming over every inch of the clubhouse. They separated the Black Vultures interviewed them one by one, cross-referenced stories, looked for inconsistencies. Torres ran the show with ruthless efficiency, missing nothing, letting nothing slide. Ryder told her everything. The vote to exile Ghost, the journal they'd recovered, Reaper's confession, the safety deposit box in Colorado, the shootout at the bank. Every detail laid bare like a wound being cleaned before it could heal. When he finished, Torres sat back in her chair and studied him across the folding table they'd set up in what used to be the clubhouse bar. Dawn light was starting to filter through the windows. You realize your club is going to be under federal scrutiny for years after this. I know. You realize some of your members might face charges regardless of cooperation. I know. And you're still willing to testify? To put all of this on record? Who? I destroyed an innocent man's life because I believed convenient lies over inconvenient truth. Ryder's voice was rough from talking for hours. If testifying is what it takes to undo some of that damage, then yeah, I'm willing. Torres made a note on her tablet. What about the others? Will they cooperate? All of them. We voted this morning. Emergency church session before you got here. Unanimous decision to tell the truth and face whatever comes. Ryder leaned forward. But Agent Torres, that kid out there, Eli Mercer, he doesn't testify. He's been through enough. His statement gets taken here, recorded, and then he walks away clean. That's non-negotiable. You don't get to make demands. It's not a demand. It's the price of cooperation. Ryder held her gaze. That boy watched his mother die, thought she died, and rode 1,000 miles alone to find the only family his father told him mattered. He's 13 years old. If you put him on a witness stand and make him relive all of that in front of cameras and defense attorneys, you'll break something in him that won't heal. So you take his statement here, you seal it, and you use the evidence we've given you instead. There's enough to convict without traumatizing a kid who's already been traumatized enough. Torres was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, we'll keep him out of court if possible, but his parents will need to testify. They will. Ghost especially. He's been waiting 9 years to tell this story. Then we have a deal. Torres stood, offered her hand. Ryder shook it. Her grip was firm, professional. For what it's worth, Mr. Kane, you did the right thing, eventually. Better late than never. Doesn't feel that way. It never does. She gathered her files. Get some rest. We'll need more detailed statements in a few days. And find a lawyer, a good one. You're going to need it. She left. Ryder sat alone in the empty bar area, listening to the sounds of federal agents packing up outside, motorcycle engines starting as the Allied clubs began to disperse. The war was over, but the aftermath was just beginning. He found Ghost outside as the sun climbed higher, painting the Missouri hills in gold and amber. Ghost sat on his old Sportster, the one Eli had ridden, the one Ryder had piloted through the chaos, running his hands over the restored chrome like he was relearning its shape. Ryder. Ghost didn't look up. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about being sorry. I am sorry, for all of it, for not believing you, for... I know. Ghost finally met his eyes. And I meant what I said, too. That punch wasn't just anger. It was closure. I needed to hit you. You needed to be hit. Now it's done. Is it? It has to be. Ghost stood, hands in his pockets, looking older than his years. I can't carry that rage anymore. It's been eating me alive for 9 years. Every night I'd lie awake thinking about how to make you all pay for what you did. How to hurt you, the way you hurt me. He paused. But then I'd think about Eli, about Sarah, about the fact that revenge wouldn't bring back the years I lost, wouldn't undo the damage, wouldn't make me whole again. So what does make you whole? This. Ghost gestured around them. Seeing my son safe, having my wife back, knowing the truth is finally out and the men who destroyed my life are facing justice. He looked at Ryder. And knowing that you, all of you, fought for that truth even when it would have been easier to let it stay buried. That means something. Ryder felt something in his chest crack open. Not breaking, opening. I failed you, Ghost. We all did. And I don't know how to fix that. You can't fix it. It's not fixable. Ghost's voice was gentle but firm. What you can do is be better going forward, make different choices. Stand up for the next brother who gets accused before the evidence is in. That's how you honor what happened. Not by wallowing in guilt, but by learning from it. I don't know if I can. You already did. The moment you started questioning the official story about me. The moment you chose to believe Eli over your own assumptions. The moment you put everything on the line to get to the truth. Ghost extended his hand. You're not the man who exiled me anymore, Ryder. Don't carry him around like a ghost you can't bury. Ryder looked at the offered hand, took it. This time it wasn't just a gesture of truce, it was forgiveness, earned through blood and miles and choices that cost everything. What happens now? Ryder asked, after all this. I don't know. Haven't planned that far ahead. Spent so long focused on surviving and fighting that I forgot to think about what comes after. Ghost smiled slightly. Guess I'll figure it out with my family. Maybe settle somewhere quiet. Maybe let Eli have a normal childhood for the years he's got left before he's not a kid anymore. He's a good kid, brave, smart, stubborn as hell, gets that from his mother. Ghost's expression softened. She's the strong one. Always was. I was just too stupid to see it back then. They stood in companionable silence, watching the last of the federal vehicles pull away, leaving the clubhouse grounds scarred and empty. Watson emerged from inside, still refusing treatment, moving carefully. Twerk followed. Then Dutch, Jake, Bones, Crow. One by one, the black vultures gathered in the parking lot, all of them bearing the marks of the night's chaos. Grizz was last. The old biker moved slowly, limping, one eye swollen shut. He stopped in front of Ghost, looked him in the eye for a long moment. I should have stood with you, Grizz said finally. His voice was thick with emotion and regret. 9 years ago, when they called for the vote, I should have stood up and told them what I knew. That you were innocent, that the evidence was manufactured, that Reaper was lying. Why didn't you? Because they had pictures of my grandkids, knew where they went to school, what time they got home, what route they walked. Grizz's hands shook. I had a choice between protecting them or protecting you, and I chose blood over brotherhood. Ghost studied him. I would have made the same choice. Grizz's eye widened. What? If someone threatened Eli? If someone said they'd hurt my son unless I betrayed my club? Ghost's voice was steady. I would have burned this whole place to the ground to keep him safe. So yeah, old man, I forgive you, but you need to forgive yourself. That's the harder part. Grizz made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He pulled Ghost into a rough embrace, the kind old bikers give when words aren't enough. When they separated, both men had tears on their faces, neither bothered to hide. I'm retiring, Grizz said to Ryder. Turning in my patch. I've got maybe 10 good years left in me. Want to spend them with my grandkids. Not in a courtroom or a prison cell. Yes. We'll miss you, Ryder replied simply. Because what else was there to say? The old biker had earned his exit. One more thing. Grizz reached into his jacket, pulled out a worn leather journal. Different from the one Ghost had hidden. This one was older, more personal. I kept my own records. Everything I knew. Everything I was forced to do. Every meeting with Reaper. Every threat the grinders made. I couldn't tell anyone while my family was at risk. But now that they're in protective custody, now that this is over, he handed it to Ghost. This is my testimony, my confession, everything you need to make sure the whole truth comes out. Ghost took the journal carefully, opened it, read the first page. His jaw tightened. You documented all of it, every word, every betrayal, including my own. Grizz's voice was hollow. Won't make up for what I did, but maybe it'll help put the bastards who made me do it behind bars for good. Sarah appeared in the clubhouse doorway, Eli beside her. The boy looked exhausted, but calmer, the kind of calm that came after the storm passed and you realized you'd survived. He saw Ghost and started forward, then stopped when he noticed the gathering of bikers. Ghost waved him over. Eli came slowly, Sarah following, both of them moving into the circle of black vultures like they belonged there, because they did now. They were part of this brotherhood whether they wore patches or not. Eli. Ghost put a hand on his son's shoulder. There's something I need you to understand about these men, about what they did. They exiled you. Eli's voice was flat. They believed lies about you. Yeah, they did, and that was wrong. Ghost looked around at the gathered bikers. But they also risked everything to learn the truth. They fought for you, protected you, brought your mother back to me. These men aren't perfect. They made terrible mistakes. But when it mattered most, when they had to choose between the easy wrong and the hard right, they chose right. So I'm supposed to forgive them? Eli's jaw set stubbornly. Just like that? No, I'm supposed to forgive them. You're supposed to decide for yourself what kind of man you want to be. Ghost crouched down to Eli's level. You can carry the anger, the resentment, the knowledge that these men failed your father. You can let that poison you, or you can look at what they did to make it right and decide that maybe people are more complicated than heroes and villains, that maybe everyone deserves a chance to be better than their worst mistake. Eli looked at Ryder, at Watson, at the rest of the black vultures standing witness to this moment. His face was unreadable. Then he stepped forward and offered his hand to Ryder. My dad says you kept me alive, that you could have turned me away, but you didn't. Ryder took the boy's hand carefully. Your father told you to come to us. We weren't going to let him down twice. Are you going to jail? Maybe. Probably. Ryder didn't sugarcoat it. We broke a lot of laws getting to the truth. Might have to pay for that. That's stupid. You were trying to do the right thing. Sometimes doing the right thing has consequences anyway. Ryder released the boy's hand. But those consequences are worth it, because your father's name is cleared, because you've got your family back, because justice is being served. That's not nothing. Eli nodded slowly. Then, to everyone's surprise, he stepped back and raised his hand in a small, uncertain salute. Thank you. For protecting me, for bringing my mom back, for... His voice cracked. For fighting for my dad when he couldn't fight for himself. Every biker in that circle straightened. Multiple hands came up in return salutes. Watson, Torque, Dutch, Grizz, even Ryder, feeling the weight of that gesture settle into his bones like an oath. This was what brotherhood actually meant. Not the patches or the bikes or the lifestyle. It meant standing between the wolves and the innocents. It meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. It meant being willing to bleed for people you barely knew because it was right. Ghost's hand landed on Ryder's shoulder. Take care of them, brother, the club, the legacy. Make it mean something. You're leaving. For now. Sarah needs medical treatment, real treatment, not hiding in cheap motels. Eli needs stability, school, a chance to be a kid instead of a survivor. Ghost's voice was tired but certain. We'll come back. For the trials. For whatever testimony they need. But after that, we disappear for a while. Let the dust settle. Let my family heal. Where will you go? Don't know yet. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere the grinders and their allies can't find us, even if they wanted to. Ghost pulled Ryder into a brief, fierce embrace. But you've got my number. Something happens, something big, you call. I'll be there. That's a promise. I'll hold you to it. They separated. Ghost moved to his family, gathered them up, started walking toward a truck that had pulled in sometime during the chaos. Not his bike, a family vehicle. The kind with car seats and airbags and all the suburban safety features that said he was choosing a different life now. Eli looked back once as they loaded up, raised his hand in that same small salute. Then they were gone, truck pulling away down the gravel road, leaving tire tracks in the dirt that would fade with the next rain. The black vultures stood in silence, watching them disappear. Well, Watson said finally, breaking the spell, guess we should start cleaning up. Place looks like a war zone. It was a war zone, Torque pointed out. Then let's clean it up anyway. Make it look like home again. They worked through the morning, all of them together, picking up shell casings and broken glass, patching bullet holes, sweeping away the evidence of violence. The Allied clubs had mostly dispersed, but a few stragglers stayed to help, former rivals working alongside the Black Vultures because Ghost had called them and they'd answered. By noon, the clubhouse looked almost normal. The door was replaced with a temporary barrier. The walls were scarred but standing. The bar was restocked. Someone found coffee and breakfast sandwiches from town. They sat around the big table, eating in exhausted silence, none of them quite able to process what had happened. Ryder's phone buzzed. A text from Torres. Briggs is talking. Named 6 other agents. This is going to be bigger than we thought. You and your club are clear of criminal charges in exchange for continued cooperation. Official letter coming tomorrow. He read it aloud. Relief rippled through the room. We're clear, Jake repeated like he couldn't believe it. After everything, we're actually clear, Jack. For now, Ryder cautioned. But Torres is right. This is going to be ongoing for months, maybe years. We'll be under scrutiny. Every move watched, every decision questioned. So we make good decisions, Dutch said simply. We run a clean club. We protect our territory without partnering with criminals. We remember what we almost lost. And we honor Ghost, Watson added, by being the men he believed we could be, even when we weren't. A spit. Almost such a. They raised coffee cups in a silent toast. To Ghost. To Eli. To Sarah. To second chances and hard-won redemptions. To surviving the storm and choosing to rebuild instead of running away. The weeks that followed were brutal in a different way. Depositions. Grand jury testimony. Media attention that turned the Black Vultures into national news for all the wrong reasons before the real story came out and the narrative shifted. Ryder did 17 interviews, each one feeling like peeling his own skin off. But he did them. They all did. Reaper pled guilty to avoid trial. Got 15 years federal. His daughters visited him once, never came back. Grizz retired officially, moved to Florida to be near his grandkids. Sent postcards occasionally that never said much but meant everything. Agent Thomas Briggs got life without parole. 4 other agents took plea deals. The Grinders' leadership was dismantled, scattered, broken. Vincent Corelli died in federal custody, officially a suicide, though the Black Vultures suspected otherwise. Some debts got paid in ways that never made the official record. Through it all, the Black Vultures rebuilt, not just the clubhouse, but the club itself. They rewrote the bylaws, implemented new vetting procedures, created accountability measures, made it harder for one bad decision to tear everything apart. And they rode. Every Sunday morning, regardless of weather, the convoy rolled out. 19 bikes in formation, cutting through the Missouri hills, engines roaring in harmony. They rode to remember, to honor, to prove that brotherhood meant something beyond the mistakes that almost destroyed it. 3 months after the showdown, Ryder got a call from an unknown number. It's me. One automotor people. Ghost's voice, sounding better, stronger. Wanted to give you an update. How's Sarah? Is she all beat? Better. Doctors say the treatment's working. She might actually beat this thing. The relief in his voice was palpable. Eli's in school, making friends, playing soccer. Acts like a normal kid most days. Some nights he has nightmares, but we're working through it. And you? Learning to sleep without a weapon under my pillow. Learning to trust that nobody's coming to finish what the Grinders started. A pause. It's harder than fighting, but I'm getting there. Where are you? Uncle. Can't tell you that. Not yet. Maybe never. Ghost's voice softened. But I wanted you to know we're okay. That what you did, what the club did, it mattered. We've got a future now. We've got hope. That's more than we had 4 months ago. Ghost, Michael, I need you to know something. Ryder gripped the phone tighter. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did to you. What we did. I know I can't fix it, but I'm going to try anyway. I know you will. That's why I called. Ghost took a breath. Ryder, I forgive you. Completely. Honestly. Without reservation. You need to hear that. You need to accept it. Because carrying that guilt isn't going to change the past. It's just going to poison your future. I don't deserve forgiveness. Nobody does. That's what makes it forgiveness. Ghost's voice was firm. Now, stop punishing yourself and go be the president the Black Vultures need. Be the man I know you can be. That's how you honor what happened. Not by flagellating yourself, but by being better us. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Ghost added, tell Watson his writing still sucks. Tell Torque his coffee's still too strong. Tell Dutch I'll beat him at pool next time we meet. And tell all of them thank you. From me. From Sarah. From Eli. Thank you for giving us back our lives. I will. Take care, brother. You too. The call ended. Ryder sat alone in his office. They'd rebuilt it after the shooting, made it bigger, added windows that let in natural light, and let himself cry for the first time since this whole thing started. Not sad tears. Cathartic ones. The kind that washed away poison that had been building for too long. When he finally emerged, Watson was waiting outside with 2 cups of coffee. You good? Yeah. Ryder took the offered cup. Yeah, I'm good. Ghost? They're safe. They're healing. That's enough. They walked out to the parking lot where the bikes waited. The sun was setting, painting the Missouri hills in colors that reminded Ryder of hope instead of blood for the first time in what felt like forever. The rest of the club was already mounting up for the evening ride. Their ritual, their meditation, their way of staying connected to what mattered. Ryder swung onto his Harley, the engine caught with a familiar roar. He felt the vibration through his bones, the connection to machine and road and brothers that had sustained him through everything. They pulled out in formation, 19 bikes strong, heading into the sunset. And as they rode, Ryder thought about Ghost and Eli and Sarah. Thought about second chances and hard-won redemptions. Thought about the fact that 9 years ago he'd destroyed a good man's life, and somehow, impossibly, he'd been given the opportunity to help put it back together. The road stretched ahead, endless and open. Behind them, the clubhouse lights came on one by one, a beacon in the gathering darkness. A sign that said home, that said family, that said brotherhood meant standing together even when, especially when, it would be easier to stand apart. They rode through the cold Missouri night, engines thundering, leather jackets snapping in the wind, not running from anything anymore, not chasing ghosts, just riding, just being, just holding on to the truth that some things were worth fighting for, even when the fight cost everything. And somewhere far away, in a place they'd never name, a man who'd been dead for 9 years sat with his family in a warm house and listened to his son laugh. Really laugh. The kind of laugh that said healing was possible. That said the nightmares would fade eventually. That said the future wasn't just survival anymore. Ghost looked at Sarah across the dinner table. She smiled at him, tired but genuinely happy. Eli was talking about his soccer game, about the goal he almost scored, about his new friend who thought motorcycles were cool. Normal things. Beautiful things. The kind of life Ghost had fought 9 years to make possible. Later, after Eli went to bed, Ghost stood on the porch and looked up at the stars. The night was cold but clear. Somewhere out there his brothers were riding, keeping the promise, honoring the bond that transcended distance and time and all the ways they'd failed each other. He thought about Ryder's voice on the phone. The guilt, the determination to be better, the refusal to let the past define the future. And Ghost understood, finally, that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go. It was about giving someone else permission to let go too. To stop carrying weight that would crush them if they held it long enough. Sarah came outside, wrapped a blanket around both their shoulders. They stood together in comfortable silence, the kind only possible between people who'd survived hell and chosen each other anyway. Think we'll ever go back? She asked quietly. To Missouri? To the club? Yeah, Ghost considered it. Maybe. Someday. When Eli's older. When it's safe. When the wounds aren't so fresh. He pulled her closer. But right now, this is enough. This is everything. I'm glad you found your way back to us. I never left. Not really. Every mile I rode, every fight I had, every night I stayed alive when it would have been easier to quit. All of it was about getting back to you. To him. To this. He gestured at the quiet house, the safe neighborhood, the ordinary life that had seemed impossible for so long. This is what I fought for. Not revenge, not vindication. This. Sarah kissed him softly. Then you won. We won, he corrected. All of us, together. Inside, Eli called out, something about a bad dream. They went to him immediately, both parents surrounding their son with comfort and safety, and the promise that the monsters were gone now, that sleep was safe, that tomorrow would come without violence or fear. And in Missouri, the black vultures rolled back into the clubhouse parking lot as midnight approached. They killed their engines in unison, the sudden silence almost deafening after hours of mechanical thunder. Nobody spoke for a long moment, just stood in the cold, breathing, being present, being alive. Same time next week? Dutch asked. Same time next week, Ryder confirmed. They filed inside one by one. The fire was already burning. Someone had started it before they left, knowing they'd need the warmth when they returned. Coffee was brewing. Whiskey was on the bar for anyone who wanted it. Home. Scarred and imperfect and held together by determination and loyalty, but home nonetheless. Ryder stood at the threshold for a moment before going inside. Looked back at the parking lot, the bikes lined up like sentinels, the Missouri hills dark and silent beyond. Thought about Ghost riding through these same hills 9 years ago, heading into exile with nothing but hope and determination to keep him warm. And thought about the journey that had brought them all here. Broken, rebuilt, forever changed by the weight of mistakes and the possibility of redemption. The past couldn't be changed. The damage couldn't be undone. But the future was unwritten. And maybe, just maybe, they'd earned the right to write it differently this time. He walked inside. The door closed behind him, with a sound like a benediction. And the Black Vulture's MC settled in for the night. Brothers bound not by perfection, but by their willingness to face their failures and fight like hell to be better. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of winter and possibility. The clubhouse lights burned warm against the darkness. And somewhere in the distance, a crow called 3 times before flying away into the night, as if delivering a message only the wind could hear. The road went on. The bikes would ride again. The brotherhood would endure. And Ghost's legacy lived on, not in revenge or bitterness, but in the choice his brothers made every day to honor his sacrifice by being the men he always believed they could be. The kind of men who stood between the wolves and the innocents. The kind of men who protected the vulnerable. The kind of men who understood that brotherhood wasn't about never failing. It was about what you did after the failure, how you rebuilt, how you atoned, how you rode forward into the unknown, engines roaring, hearts open, willing to bleed for what mattered most. Family, truth, and the unbreakable bond between brothers who'd walked through fire together and emerged forever changed, forever scarred, forever committed to being worthy of the patches they wore and the trust they'd almost destroyed. The night deepened. The fire crackled. And the Black Vulture's MC faced tomorrow with clear eyes and scarred hands and the hard-won knowledge that redemption wasn't given. It was earned, 1 mile at a time, one choice at a time, one brother at a time, until the road ended or they did, whichever came first.